interest. Councillor Greenland would like to make an announcement.
Yes, Chairman, thank you for the opportunity. I know that there has been a considerable amount of confusion and misreporting in terms of the Council's street furniture policy. So I just wanted to take this opportunity of ensuring that members are clear anyway of what the current position is. First of all, I think it has to be said that for some time disability groups in Monmouthshire have been lobbying this council on behalf of those in particular who are visually impaired or who are in wheelchairs. And I think I'm right in saying that over the last couple of years we've received 57 complaints about obstructions in the highway. Now the council has an obligation to act to protect the safety of all our residents. Equally, we recognise the added vibrancy that trading outside premises gives to our towns. And so in formulating a policy, the intention was to balance the safety for pedestrians with the opportunities for retailers to maximise their businesses. We introduced charges not as a money-making idea, but simply to cover the costs of the administration of the policy. And charges were capped to, I think I'm right in saying again, to a maximum of £180 per year. But we accept that in this very difficult time for high street trading generally, and really that is because they are suffering pressures from internet trading, and here in Monmouthshire our traders particularly suffer from the Welsh Government's decision to revalue their rates, which has impacted very heavily on Monmouthshire businesses. Because of these issues, we've asked officers not to collect the charges that were part of the policy. We will continue to issue permits so that businesses can maximise their trading while still allowing officers to control the use of the public highway and to make it safe for the public. Now, Cabinet will be meeting in the autumn to formally withdraw the charges aspect of the policy. We'll also take into account any other representations on the policy itself and the permits for the policy, and particularly representations that may be made next week at the Strong Communities Scrutiny Committee. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Greenland. The next item on the agenda is declarations of interest. Have anybody got any interest they wish to declare? No. We'll go on to Chairman's announcement. Those of you who are observant, on page 1, you'll note that I didn't attend my civic service on the 8th of July because it's been missed off the list. Anyway, I have an apology from the office over that. We have two petitions to be presented this afternoon. The first one, Councillor Blakeborough.
Thanks, Chair. I have a petition here of over 1,400 signatures asking that the Council reconsider their decision to axe the 65 bus service. Now, to put it in context, this service is a vital link for all the rural communities along the B4293, a road that links Chepstow to Monmouth. Many residents within these communities, they can't drive, and we're looking at young people as well as older people. Cutting this service is to sever their lifeline. As we know, without public transport, they can't access education, employment, social and leisure activities. I would also go on to say that any decision to remove public transport is in clear conflict with Monmouthshire's vision to end loneliness and isolation and to create a thriving and connected county. Thriving and connected county are one of Monmouthshire's priorities. We are, all of us here, are acutely aware of the budget pressures, and it's really not helped by the Welsh Government's systematic erosion of public transport funds to local authorities. However, there is a principle to be upheld in doing everything we can, not just to preserve public transport, but to develop it. So we've got an integrated public transport system, so our residents can live independently and live with vibrant lives. Now, Save the 65 bus campaign kicked off at the start of July, the start of this month, and it was spearheaded by the incredible Rosemary Corcoran. She's a local resident and she uses the 65. Her commitment, her drive, her community spirit got everybody on board with this. And I have to, at this point, also thank Richard John, because he also got involved and met with some of the residents. I'd also like to thank all the residents who flooded Rogers and the Cabinet members' inboxes with letters of protest. We are at the end of July now, and I was made aware only 2 days ago that the decision to axe the 65 route has been overturned. So with this petition, I want to conclude: they shouted, you heard, and it's people power that saved the 65. Thank you, Chair.
Are there any more petitions? Councillor Roden.
Thank you, Chairman. It's working now. There's an issue with traffic flow and pedestrian safety on Hereford Road in Monmouth that is of long standing and needs to be addressed by Monmouthshire County Council in the near future in order to prevent an accident occurring. I would like to deliver this large petition on behalf of local residents and users of Hereford Road to encourage the council to act to reduce the problem in the autumn. Thank you.
The next item on the agenda is the public open forum, which I have no notification of any this afternoon. So we go on to item 5, which is to confirm the minutes of the meetings of the County Council held on both the 21st of June and the 6th of July. Thank you. Does anybody wish to bring any matters up on pages 3 to 12? No. Then we move on to the second one on the 6th of July, which is page 13 of our bundle. Anybody got any matters arising on that? Nope. Somebody move, please. Moved and seconded. Thank you. Good. So we now go on to item 7 on the agenda, to note the minutes of the Audit Committee for the 24th of May. Councillor Evans, do you wish to? Oh, sorry, item 6.
Yes, thank you, Chair.
Sorry,
Can I
my
ask the
pardon.
Council to accept the minutes, both the minutes, please, as read?
Move. Okay, can somebody move final approval, please? Thank you. And you have a second meeting on the 4th of June, as read.
It's for both the minutes.
Okie dokie. Anybody got any points arising? You moving them? Thank you very much. And they seconded? Thank you, Councillor. Right, now we go on to the Audit Committee on item 7, dated the 24th of May. Councillor Higginson.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I'd like to... I nearly knocked a glass of water with them. This is the annual report of the Audit Committee, and it gives members an overview of what's happened in the past financial year. The committee agreed that the report was a fair account of the past year's proceedings, and I would ask the council to accept them.
Minutes.
Chair, that I think the,
the minutes,
I think
yeah.
it was the minutes that
Minutes
were
of the
being
last
done. The
vote.
annual report comes later.
It must be the warm weather. Have we got problems with the sound in here this afternoon?
Very quiet, isn't it?
Is it me or is it the whole system?
No, it's the system.
So,
We'll check it out now, but if they can speak a bit louder.
well, they don't normally find it difficult to speak loud, certainly. Right, am I on this item now? Not to me. Okay. We now go to the item of reports of the Chief Officer, Enterprise. Councillor Greenland, do you wish to present this one to start with?
Thank you, Chair. Sorry, which item are we on now? Oh, that's right. Okay, confusing. Right. Okay. Chairman, it seems almost impossible that it's 10 years since this council took the decision to float, if that's the right word, our housing stock into what is now Monmouthshire Housing Association. But it's 10 years, and in that intervening period we have seen huge strides forward in Monmouthshire Housing Association and in the condition of the houses that our Monmouthshire residents live in. And it's a great pleasure to have with us this afternoon the Chief Executive of Monmouthshire Housing Association, John Keegan. So I'm going to hand over to John to give us his presentation.
Thank you, Bob. Oh, you're at the top table, John.
Good afternoon, everyone. We know we live in strange times when the leader of the council shows you a picture of his herd of camels down in Portskew from this morning. But listen, I won't detain you too long. I know it's hot, I'm sure you'll have a long meeting, and I'll fly through this. And do you want me to take any questions at the end? Yeah, okay, take questions at the end as well. Okay, so we're 10 years old. The vote was held just about 12 years ago. We're well underway, as you can imagine. We've tackled all of the primary issues that were the primary cause of the transfer in the first instance was lack of investment in their stock, not through any fault of the local authority. That's just the way the finances were set up at the time. And remember the decision of the council was to put the information in front of the tenants, not to say yes or no to the transfer, but to put the information in front of the tenants to make up their own minds, which is exactly what happened. But the transfer was based on an offer document which from Monmouthshire County Council to the tenants, which we were then contracted to deliver over 5 years. Predominantly that was to do with the physical condition of the properties, updating doors, windows, roofs, central heating systems, and since then we've been working on primarily the external areas of some estates and some estate regeneration as well. The tenants did agree to the transfer on the basis of the document by 60 to 40 majority, and the transfer happened on the 21st of January 2008. Our mission since then has been to provide high quality homes and services that put people first. Yeah, we've been challenged in that over time, and certainly where we feel we haven't done that, we've done something about it. We've had a lot of council nominees on our board over the years, and they've done a tremendous job. The primary thing I think we need to highlight is the understanding of the fiduciary duty between the role as a councillor in here, but when they come on our board, that they have a fiduciary duty to act in the best interests of Monmouthshire Housing Association. And I've got to say, every single councillor we've had has performed that role exceptionally. Never once have we felt that they've put up their hands in the council's interest. Anytime the hand has gone up to vote for something that's been in our interest, and that's about strong governance, which I think has been a real success story for us over the years. So what about the progress? Before transfer we had 150 staff and £7 million to spend each year. Immediately on the day of transfer, the amount of money we had to spend went up to £10 million because of the way the money worked. Before that, we always had to give 30% of our income straight back to the government. From the day of transfer onwards, we've got to keep all of it. Straight away, immediately, that £3 million extra can service up to 30 or 40 million pounds worth of debt, which we've gone about drawing down more or less over the past few years. Our turnover in that period of time has increased to over £20 million. We've got 250 directly employed staff and about 100 with contractors at any one time. Had we stayed with the local authority, we always anticipate the numbers employed would be about 100. So you can see that there's been a significant economic impact in the interim. We've developed key partnerships and supply chains, spend most of our turnover in Welsh companies. The sector as a whole, which the turnover of housing associations in Wales is about £1.2 billion. About 89% of that turnover is spent in Welsh companies. You can see the impact we have across the whole economy. In particular, we use Robert Price as our main building provider there in Abergavenny company, and it's great for us to have those kind of local relationships. We run the Common Housing Register on behalf of Monmouth County Council, and that's there primarily to capture those people who feel they're in housing need, and then to a choice-based system, allocate that stock and that of our fellow ourselves fairly. And suffice to say, we've never been pulled up on the allocation of the property the way we allocate it. We've done it as per legislation, but the key thing is that people have a choice. The people choose where to live now, whereas years ago we used to tell them where to live. Since transfer, we've demolished and sold obsolete and poor quality stock. Primarily that's in our shelter scheme. So it's St Cadoc's in Raglan has gone. We've got Trevor Bone Court in Monmouth has gone, and also Brookside in Collica has gone. That programme is now finished, certainly for the moment anyway. And in their place we've produced much better quality stock. At this precise moment, we've got some innovation funding from Welsh Government. We're building 4 OAP bungalows. We've done a lot of market research about we want to give people homes that they want, not the homes that we think they want. We've done a lot of market research over the past few years about the types of homes people want within Monmouthshire. We're going to move away from OAP apartments. The people don't particularly want them. Some people do, but not enough. And as much as possible, build bungalows. The key thing I've got to say with the local authorities, the support we've had from the planning department here within the local authority, because this is about building at much greater densities but giving people what they want, albeit at much greater densities. And if we hadn't been supported by the planning department here, we wouldn't have had the innovation funding. We wouldn't be able to, I suppose, experiment with this type of accommodation, which will allow us to build bungalows at only slightly less density than we would build apartments. But that is what people want. When we put out a bungalow, for example, to rent, we'll get about 40 bids per bungalow. When we put out an apartment, we might get 5, maybe 10. You can see the difference. The people are voting with their feet, and that's what we're there to provide. We do want to have properties where people and homes are proud to live in, and certainly our satisfaction rates are amongst the best in Wales. Our satisfaction rates with our renovated properties are incredibly high as well. That takes time, takes money, takes effort, but once again, any home with the replacement rate in Wales, every home is going to have to stand for 300 years. So we're going to have to invest in those properties over and over and over again, and that's what we were intent on doing. Last year was the first year since stock transfer that we actually had more stock than we had at the point of transfer. But at the point of transfer, we had a lot of bedsit bungalows, shared bathing facilities. They were incredibly unpopular and increasingly were becoming empty. So the fact that we've only just now had more than a transfer doesn't mean that we're in a worse position. We're in a better position because now we've got homes that people want to live in. And from now on, the numbers will increase. So our hope and our aspiration is to build about 100 new properties every year for people to buy, but also shared ownership and also to rent. Our objectives, pretty much like the wellbeing plan for the local authority, are based around, okay, us being a landlord, which isn't your main duty, but the other 3 are very much tied into what you require in the local authority as well. An economic impact, an environmental impact, and a people impact. So some of our achievements over the past few years, we're at Times Top 100 company, we became 50th for non-profit making companies. We're the 4th largest employer in the county from what I can see. We spend about £120 million in repairs and improvement, 221 new homes with 500 in the pipeline. And we frequently help the council double its grant allocation. Generally speaking, Monmouthshire is entitled about £1.2 million a year in allocation for social housing from the Welsh Government. Working with your planning department, we always have schemes ready to go. So in March, they're sending out desperate emails saying, anybody got any schemes ready to go? We always do. We've been able to, year on year, double the allocation of grant within this local authority because we're ready to go. That takes a lot of time and effort on our behalf, speculatively, so to speak, to make sure we're ready. But it is worth the while because we're here to provide homes, not to complain. In the end, we've got about 230 people into work. We keep, the government and DWP keep giving us contracts to do this because we've been way more successful than nearly any other organisation in Wales for the amount of money they give us with the amount of people we get into work on the back of that. And I think that indicates real good value for money. About 235 people into volunteering. That's not just up people. A lot of those volunteer with us. but it is about isolation, which is a significant problem. If you look at your well-being plan about the demographics and isolation, it's about when you turn 65 and you get a state pension, it doesn't mean that you're of no use to anyone anymore. Volunteering is an incredible way about your personal well-being, about keeping you connected with your local community, and about getting people out to meet one another. And certainly I'm one of these people who thinks that volunteering should be a GP prescription, not antidepressants. You should be actually, even I think you should be obliged to volunteer, because it gets you out of your house, keeps your horizons broad. We find it works really well for us. We've done about 3,000 housing allocations in the past 10 years, £2 million in welfare benefits claimed by vulnerable people. Now, our job is not just to maximise benefits. The maximising benefits for vulnerable people is a key part of what we do. But our real aim now is to get people into work. But even now, because so many people, the unemployment rate in Britain is about 4.2%, which normally would something really to crow about. But the trouble is real incomes haven't increased for about a decade. And also there's a huge amount of underemployment in Britain. So lots of people have 16 to 20 hours work a week, therefore they're in employment. But in actual fact, they're quite a shortfall on their potential earnings because they're not working 37 hours a week, which is a real problem. So our original aim is get people into work, but now once they're in work, we like to keep in contact with them, see can we give them additional training so they can get better jobs and longer hours. Because once you're in that gap between 16 and 32 hours a week, you really are struggling. You lose an awful lot of benefits, but your hourly rate is quite low, and you really do lose out. And we've discussed this a lot at board, haven't we, Dimitri? Yeah. So we save about £700,000 in bills and debt. The interesting, why do we go after this? Why do we help people with this? The economists will tell you that the lower your income is, the shorter distance you go to spend your money. So in actual fact, our tenants, if we save them any money, will spend their money in Monmouthshire. They don't go to cribs, they go to the local shop. The more money we can put in their pockets, which is why we put all the PV panels on the roofs to reduce their electricity bills. You reduce their outgoings, you increase their income, they'll spend that income very, very locally and improve their local economy as well. We've handled 340,000 telephone calls in the interim and resolved more or less about over 1,000 antisocial behaviour cases. These aren't unique cases, sometimes they repeat, but I would say in our estates is not a huge issue. Yes, it is a nuisance, and if you're a victim, it's a particular nuisance. Let's not underscore it. But I would say that generally speaking, our estates, they are really good quality communities to live in, and we want to improve that even further. So we've created about 9 million kilowatt hours of electricity from our PV panels. Every single roof elevation in our stock, with a south or southwest or southeast elevation, has got panels on its roof helping reduce their bills. We've got sector leading levels of tenant satisfaction. They're the experts. Estate regeneration going on in Oakley Way at the moment. That took a while. Primarily we knew what we needed to do, but we had a lot of leaseholders down there. The leaseholders could have stopped the work going ahead, or could have held out ransom-wise to stop us doing the work. We needed to slowly but surely buy out all of the leaseholders. Once the leaseholders were all bought out, we could get along, set about doing the work. Inside each flat, not the external works, inside each flat we're spending about £20,000 in each apartment in Oakley Way. And for the first time ever, the satisfaction levels in Oakley Way are about average, and we expect them to get even higher as we go through the whole estate. And I think Councillor Easton has been taking a particular interest in what's going on down there. God knows he contacts me enough about it anyway. And that's your job though, isn't it? But that was a particular one for us. It wasn't an attractive environment for people to live in. When they went to live there, they immediately put in an application to move out, but yet they were staying on average about 8 years. It was incumbent on us to create an environment where people wanted to stay. We've knocked down 3 blocks of flats. We'll replace them with about 30 houses. The people who were in the flats that got knocked down will move back into the houses. Additional people will move into the Brookside site. Okay, so we were the highest rated housing association in Wales by the regulator for several years. They don't rate it like that anymore, but all I can say is at the time when they did rate it, we were the highest rated. We formed a trading subsidiary, about 15 people working in it now, from scratch, £1.6 million turnover and growing. And we are a multi-award winning organisation, both with the tenants and for the organisation itself. So what does the future hold for us? So working with Monmouthshire County Council to make our community the most desirable place in Wales to work, live and play. I don't think any of us can object to that. We want to build on our objectives, which is being an even better landlord, having a greater economic impact, reduce their environmental impact, and the people thing is about developing their capacity to get more jobs and be better citizens within Monmouthshire. And I think that would ring true with a lot of members here as well. We're the 4th largest employer. We want to become the 3rd largest employer in the county. We're started already to build our own homes. Right, recently we signed a memorandum of understanding with Edenstone Homes, which is a developer based in Magar, and Mellon Homes, which are based in Pontypool. And we're going to investigate the feasibility of setting up our own factory to build our own homes off-site, which we will then use our own workforce, hopefully, to put together. No matter what, it's about retaining the supply chain within Wales and using all of our skills to do that. So within the next 6 months, we should know whether we're going to go ahead with that or not. We reinvest all of our surpluses just about within Monmouthshire County Council area, and certainly we would look in the future to do joint ventures with Monmouthshire County Council. I think every meeting you have, I'm not going to bore you with the kind of stuff that you've got to put up with, but it's all about what you won't have in the future. It's very difficult about what you are going to have because about the cuts that are going on, the austerity. The only way, I suppose, really for all of us to cherish and relish the future is to work together with organisations that can help you realise your goals, but share the risk as well. So lots of things you have to bear the full risk, and we would be eager to help you with that. Yeah, we'll create a surplus hopefully in that risk, but that surplus, where does it get reinvested? Gets reinvested back into Monmouthshire anyway, and I think we're all winners on that basis. So really what I just want to do at the end is give you a flavour of what we've been up to. That's St. Cadoc's Court in Raglan before and after. It was a lot of bedsit units, it becoming increasingly unpopular, but the houses were incredibly popular. And if we could build more out there, we certainly would. Raglan is certainly one of these villages where, I suppose it was a bit sleepy for a while, isn't it? But people really, really want to live there now. It's becoming much, much more popular. And not that it was ever unpopular, it's becoming much more popular now. This is a garage compound up in Abergavenny. We're not here to house cars. We're not here to house furniture or bits and bobs from a house. We're here to house people. If there's any garage compound in the county that we own, that we can put a house on, that is exactly what we're going to do. Because it doesn't matter what the waiting is for a car, for a garage is. It's about people. There's 3,000 households in our waiting list. We reckon about 1,500 so really have a proper housing need. But we're only building 100 a year. So we really got to get cracking on with this. That's for two families with disabled children. Those children don't need to be in care now, looked after by their families at home, and a tremendous amount of cooperation with Monmouthshire County Council to make sure that we got the grant, we got the planning permission, and we built this to a spec where those families will be able to stay forever in their homes. And this last one is Gwehelog. That was a back garden. Now it's 2 family homes there at the moment. Still, once again, local lettings policy as well. We're very much into making sure that, particularly in areas where there's not much land, but there's a lot of demand, that local people continue to get to live in those properties. They're the people who form those communities. They should get to stay in those communities. You can't do it very often, but where we can, we absolutely understand. Just quickly, economically, these are very difficult for us to do, because you're spreading your overheads over 2 properties rather than 20. If we were a normal building business, we wouldn't do these kind of things. But we're committed to Monmouthshire and these communities, and therefore we do, because that's part of our role. So I'm not being a martyr here. This is part of our role. This is what we can and will and should do, and so we shall. The last one here is about the external works we do. On the left hand, this is Lime Tree Avenue up in Wisham. Left hand side is a property before we did the external works. You can see now we've improved a wall outside. We've improved the stairwell up the property. Grab rails which aren't deteriorating. Solar panels on the roof. If you saw the back garden, it's more akin to Kew Gardens than to Lime Tree Avenue. And as a result, another example would be Poplars Close. Roger, Poplars up in Abergavenny. Before there were bedsit bungalows. When there were bedsit bungalows and we'd put them out to let, we would get 1 bid, maybe 2 bids per property. Since we turned them into 1-bed bungalows, we now get 40 bids per property. And the key thing we learned from that people weren't interested in the bedsit. They weren't interested in the garden. They didn't like the factor of bedsit. But if you give them a 1 bed and they had to surrender some garden, they would willingly surrender the garden, just say a proper amount of room to live in. And you see in our older properties, the amount of storage space is really small, because with the best will in the world, 50, 60 years ago, when people built them, you only had 1 coat, or maybe 2. You had your Sunday coat and your weekday coat. Well, storage space wasn't very necessary. Well, now people have a lot of kit. The houses need to be large, and we've got to adapt the houses to meet the modern need. So really, I know it's a hot day, so I'm not going to go on any further. That's the shortest presentation I've ever done in my life, bearing in mind the climatic conditions. And I'm glad to see that Councillor Jones, You were getting bored with me there for a while, but you stayed awake, Bride. I am so proud of you today. All right. I'll take questions out. I haven't hurt anyone's feelings yet today, have I?
No.
Okay.
Not yet. Thank you, John, very much. I would vouch that is about the shortest address I've ever heard from you. Would anybody like to ask John a question? Yes, Councillor Eason.
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and thank you, John, for coming to talk to us. Yes, dramatic moves on Oakley Way and Brookside. Brookside had some problems in the wet weather. Oakley Way is working well. Residents are well informed by the contractors. But I got two questions. One, are you moving towards mixed hereditament, different ages within the old age pensioner bungalows? And the second question, has the Cuddy enterprise caused you any problems?
Yeah, actually, we did use Cuddies. Can I start with that one and work my way backwards? Yeah, we did use Cuddy for some demolition, but they're not contracted to any demolition for us now, so we've escaped that one. Just for Cuddies were one of the largest demolition contractors in Wales, based in Nice, and they went into administration recently, so that hasn't affected us. The mixed developments with the bungalows are interesting because we call them micro developments. We call them micro developments. So we wouldn't want to build 200 of these things together. Do you understand? We would prefer that there's smaller little parts of a larger development if we can. At the moment, we're using garage compounds, which would mean they'll stand on their own, but only very small numbers. The demographics from your well-being plan will demonstrate that there's a significant older population, but they've got very few choices about what to move into. The problem in Monmouthshire, and in Cardiff as well where I live, is that it actually is often more expensive to downsize to a bungalow than it is to stay in a family-sized accommodation. So they always want to free up some equity when you downsize, any of us would, and people aren't able to. We're hoping this will be economically better like that. But it's interesting about mixed communities. I am actually a fan of mixed communities too. If you put too many of the same type of people, whether it be young people or old people or whatever, all in the same place, yeah, you ask a particular question and you're going to get a particular answer. They become isolated. I would agree with you. All of our developments, as much as possible, have a range of properties within them. The mix of properties that we do, Councillor Easton, is based on an assessment done with Monmouthshire County Council about what's the demand in that area, what mix is required. So we don't build a development in isolation. It's always in consultation with the local authority. As regards mud on roads and bad weather, that was a disastrous winter, and yeah, the residents eloquently expressed their displeasure with the amount of mud on the road. And listen, I agree. We would much prefer. Interesting enough, hopefully on Oakley Way, that we'll get a lot of the groundworks done while the weather is still dry. It'll make a hell of a difference as regards the amount of mud we create later on. Was there another part of your question? Oh, that was it. Oh, right. Thanks. Both of us have been very concise today.
Thank you, John. Councillor Watts.
I guess I'm concerned about the level of isolation that still exists in some of our sheltered accommodation. As you know, John, you'll remember that the majority of people in my ward, and particularly in the Reddings here, didn't vote for housing stock transfer because I think they were concerned about the loss of the warden service. Now, you and I have kind of argued about this for many, many years. But talking to the people, when you knock on the doors, some of those people are obviously older. Those communities kind of look after themselves. They organise themselves. But it's a tragedy when some of the active members pass away and then they feel lost. Some of those people live in absolute isolation. They can go a week without actually seeing anybody. So when are you going to really properly address the level of isolation and loneliness that exists with those single people living in the dwellings that you look after?
Delighted you asked that question, because we've got a few officers absolutely dedicated to isolation. They go around the schemes. We get into every property every year. We have tied into a health and safety. We have a don't walk by policy, and a don't walk by policy is about structural health and safety. There's a wire hanging out of the wall or whatever. Don't just leave it there. Report to get it sorted. But part of it also is a people policy. So you see somebody who's clearly isolated in the property, we will refer them on to our officers who deal with social isolation, and then they will bring in loads of other agencies. They'll get the person out of their house to interact with their local community. We'll interact even with other residents within the same scheme. The interesting thing about shelter schemes compared to years ago and now is that there are an awful lot more independent people in sheltered schemes than there were years ago, or people who want to be independent. Interestingly enough, part of our action against social isolation is to make people independent, not dependent. And I suppose this is a philosophical argument, Councillor Watts, isn't it? Because my argument always against the resident warden was it created a dependency, and I absolutely understand that you were in favour of independence as well. But I think since the resident wardens went, people are more independent, and self-sufficient. Part of what the isolation officers do, is to get the residents to organise the activities, not for us to organise it for them, because they will wait because they're human beings. If nothing else, this will never be perfect. There's only a certain amount of money to deal with. We fund it ourselves, and we're doing what we can with the money we're doing. And I think until you and I are in a shelter scheme together down in Bulwark in our dotage, I think you and I will still be arguing about this.
Councillor Ruth Edwards, please.
Thank you, Chair, and good afternoon, John. John knows his old argument of mine, always wanting more bungalows, particularly for people to downsize, even if they're in the same community. They like to stay in the same community, but there's no suitable accommodation. And also in rural areas, yes, we do get rural allocation for housing, but it is woefully inadequate in my area. And then they stipulate that you have to be over 55 and then you are classed as an older person. And bungalows are available then for those older people when there are young families that cannot get any access to those bungalows. And a lot of them have a lot of steps up to them which aren't good for the elderly or for the young with the pushchairs. But this business of always being over 55 and classed as the only ones available for some of the housing is something that really needs to be addressed, especially in rural areas. Thank you, John.
Yeah, so the one of the reasons for the over 55 is, of course, to create a domino across our stock. So what we're trying to do is get people in family-size accommodation to move into the bungalows. And the vast majority of people who do move into our bungalows are in family-size accommodation. So although you're right that it would be nice for families to move into that accommodation, generally speaking, we do free up family-size accommodation for somebody to move into anyway. So we are working at the other thing about downsizing, Councillor Edwards. We have to, if this bungalow project we're doing with Cardiff University works, we will try and develop a 2-bed option, which will be for sale, which will free up more, hopefully, family accommodation. Because even in your area, it's trying to buy a house is every bit as big a problem as trying to rent one. Once again, it's back with the planners, and I got to say, the planners, we work really well with the planners in this local and the planning committee. Okay, I wish they were a little bit less picky about the finishes of the properties, which cost us a fortune, may I quickly add. But on the other hand, the properties do look great, don't they? So I can't really complain that much. But if we can get the land, we'll build the houses. If they're for rental, we have to get grant. If we don't get grant, bit like in Dingestow, we're going to have to build quite a few for sale and then cross-subsidise. And that's where the partnership comes in, working with you guys, understanding what the dynamic has to be for us to do what you need us to do.
Thank you, John. Councillor Crocott, next.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to raise a specific issue with you, and I apologise for that, but it's not every day we get anybody from MHA here to talk to us. I represent the Lansdowne ward in Abergavenny, and in one particular road there, Bishop's Crescent, there is a green in the middle of the street which was taken over as a stockade by MHA and its representative contractor last July. I was immediately contacted by quite a few residents in Bishop Crescent complaining about the almost incessant noise of vehicles reversing with the constant beeping of their reversing horns and so on. I was told the work would be completed by Christmas. The surveyor who was responsible for liaison with the contractor personally knocked on the doors of everybody who lived around that green to say exactly the same thing. They are still there, and it is now July. They have been there for 12 months. During the winter months, the street was turned into a quagmire. Over the last 2 or 3 weeks, it has turned into a dust bowl. Gutters have been smashed. Residents are at the end of their tether. And only at the start of this week, I had an email from a gentleman writing on behalf of his 96-year-old mother who overlooks this scene. And it follows on the last meeting I had with your surveyor and some of the residents of Bishop's Crescent. And we were again assured that everything would be gone by the end of July. a mere 12 months after it was erected. And he says, at the time of writing, there are few working days remaining until the agreed date of removal and making good. I can report some positive action has been completed in that the machinery has been moved. However, the site in terms of temporary fencing, skip, rubbish, poor quality ground remains with little or no active work over the last 4 days. I think this has been a terrible way to treat residents in my ward and a terrible way to treat many of them who are your tenants. We are not yet at the end of July, of course. I would like, if possible, if you could give me an assurance that you will look into this and possibly even give an apology to the people in Bishop's Crescent, and certainly try to do your best to get the site cleared by the final of many dates that has been given to residents there.
Thank you, Martin. I don't think this afternoon needs to be a criticism of MHA and in all of our wards, because we've all got MHA housing in our wards. It really is a reflection on where this organisation has come in the last 10 years. And John is good enough to come here. I think if everybody's got a personal problem in their ward, we could organise a meeting in this place with John and we can air those things together as a smaller group. I don't think this is the place for it. Councillor Harris. Roger, yeah.
Thank you, Chair. Afternoon, John. Pleasure to see you again. Mine's a nice gentle one, following on what Peter has said. Now, I know that I have a neighbourhood, MHA neighbourhood officer that I interact with regularly, and what I'm basically asking is, does every ward have a neighbourhood officer? And if so, there are lots of new councillors here that maybe don't know that. So if it's possible to make sure that we all know who our neighbourhood officer is, the one to go to initiate any solving of problems, that'll be good. I know that I get good service from mine, and if everyone else gets the same sort of service, then I'm sure there'll be a lot of satisfied people around. Thank you, John.
Yeah, Roger, that's no problem. We've been changing the structure about the way we work in the past couple of years. So things have been kind of changing all the time, but with the structure settled down now. I mean, Councillor Betruni brought up the same thing along similar lines at board recently as well. So I'm off for a couple of weeks from today, but when I come back, I'll make sure all of the housing officers write out to the respective members, letting them know who they are by way of introduction. Is it okay? Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, John. Councillor Kevin Williams.
Thank you, Chair. Can I first say that some of the properties that I notice that you're building at the moment are really nice properties, and well done on that.
Thank you.
You know, they are really lovely homes. I mean, what you've shown up there is just, you know, what you get on an estate where you're paying £300,000 for it. My slight concern, is that not many of these properties are getting built up the north end of the county, and I mean from Abergavenny upwards rather than the Abergavenny itself. A lot of it seems to be around the town areas. My ward is Gavilan, and I was sort of born and bred in Clydach and Etley Hill up that way. Gilwan gets a little bit extra due to the size of it, maybe land availability, I'm not sure. But I'm just wondering, do you have any plans to sort of build more places up that north end than what you have done in the past, or is it purely down to land availability and nothing else? Thanks.
Chairman, I want to emphasise I didn't plant that question. Okay, but we bought a piece of land, buying a piece of land from the local authority in Gavilan, under which we're going to do 15 houses. It is land. If we can buy it, we will. If any scrap of land at all that you can properly put a house economically onto, if we can get our hands in it, we will. The issue then will be whether it's for rent or not. So we got to get grant for it to be for low cost rent. One thing, and just referring back to the previous point, if there is no grant, we will build, but we have to be able to build for sale to cross subsidise it, because the profit then reduces the amount of debt we take out in that property, which means then the rent will cover we listen, lots of demand in the north of the county. Abergavenny, particularly the villages nearby, Gilwan less so, but Gavilan, plenty there, and we need a fresh injection of blood into Covilan, or we need local people to get a chance to get a ladder. So we before too long we'll be on that site. There's just some issues to sort out still.
I understand the one site. I was just looking at.
Yeah, no, the general issue is lack of land, or even one of the things. I know that some landowners within the local authority here, but you're looking for too much money for the land. But what then that means? Then it becomes uneconomical to try and develop at the prices that the landowners want for it. So there is a negotiating process, but we are all the time negotiating with landowners, trying to get our hands on land. A lot of the time their expectations are unrealistic, and that's even before you go out on site and find something wrong with it anyway. But if you can find me some land up there at a reasonable price, I guarantee you we're building it. Yeah, you're good man. Well, this is part of the local network. You might know somebody who hasn't got a land agent, but who might fancy it, and we will absolutely deal with them direct, and we will deal with them fairly.
Thank you, John. Councillor Howarth, please.
Good afternoon, John. Long time no speak and no see. John, may I ask one question? You did mention garages there and taking land. The garages are no use, and we will take them whenever possible to have developments. Is the mic working?
I can hear you anyway.
Yeah, okay. Could you explain then, on the basis of your old housing stock that you have with garages? It is so important that when we had developments during the 60s and 70s, there were many, and we got many around the county there, that actually we've got major issues now with tenants and also private residents, because the construction of these developments was within a remit for what was going on within the 60s and 70s. People now have 3 or 4 cars if the children stay at home, etc. And we do have many of your developments and your assets sitting there with problems which associate within the communities for parking and etc. When are you going to, as an organisation, then look at actually doing more communal parking for the older developments? Because it's so important. It's okay to have the green land there, but when you don't have any parking on a lot of these developments, it does cause us as an authority, and probably my highways officers and us as councillors, major problems with complaints, etc., and the police also. I bet that's probably one of the main criticisms I will say about all the associations is the old stock has not been given a fair hearing. Now you're doing away with as many garages as possible to build developments. I do hope that you are putting in communal parking within them developments, but to meet the 21st century, not to meet now. That's important, so I'd like an answer on that one. Second one is with the solar panels, you generate a massive amount of income there. The residents, my calculation is, get very little back. You know, I mean, who will have the tumble dryer on in the last 6 weeks, like to save electric? Who will be eating water? What their return is very minimal here. So you, as a business, are actually having the major profit from them panels. Would it not be within the interest of Monmouthshire Housing to actually give a little percentage back to everybody who has panels on there? I would ask you to do that, because it's within, they believe they're saving, and many come to me and say, well, I get nothing out of this. I've got no saving. I've got a smart meter here. I get no saving. And they're quite correct, because the calculation is you get very little back by feeding it back into the grid. You guys will have that, there's no doubt about that. So first of all, in your annual documents there, do you have a section for income from the panels? It will be a lot whenever you bought them, as you all know, and the percentage will have changed over the years. My last question to yourself is, I think it's been raised here by Roger. I think every member would like to know who their housing officer is. I've struggled over the last 6 months to find out who mine is, because they change that much and never speak to the same person twice. I can never make contact with Monmouthshire Housing on the basis of nobody will ever reply to emails to myself, which I find really poor, because we live in the 21st century now.
Don't get naughty now. You're at a meeting this week when you know that's absolutely not the case. But anyway, go ahead.
I think you're here to, as Chief Executive, I think we're sitting in the board of Monmouthshire. We sit every 6 weeks. I'd love for you to come every month. I do believe that housing stock transfer 10 years ago, I did vote for it. Would I vote for it again? I don't know. I think that's my view at the moment. I'm disappointed with what's happened with the Edge of Valley, with Cliddock. I think Councillor Williams has made the point there. There is an issue with Cliddock and Llanelly Hill. We haven't even got bus services there. For you to invest millions there, for me personally, like, we'd have to do the homework before we do that as a company. Gilwan's a different proposition. Yes, we've got plenty of homes in Gilwan, but we're touching on the realms now of where you didn't want us to go, Chairman. Sorry, we're talking about specific areas here. But what I say, John, is I think as a company, and as a non-profitable company, I think you do have to do a lot more with Monmouthshire County Council.
Right, I'll quickly rattle through those. It's a matter of priorities. People over cars every time. Now, the interesting thing on the garage compounds, just for the other members, when we look at these compounds and we look inside the garages, hardly any cars in them. People are storing everything but cars in them. The issue, the cars are still parked on the road outside the house because that's where people want to park their car. I absolutely accept, Simon, that on the older estates there are a lot more cars now than there used to be. Absolutely accept that. But there are also 3,000 households now waiting list. They're the priority. Now, the interesting thing about in the future, the futurologists will tell us that we won't have cars. You'll just dial up and a car will come to your house, a bit like Amazon anyway. So I'm fully anticipating that they're correct and this won't be a problem in the future. That might be a little bit flippant, but in actual fact it isn't. Interesting enough, one of the things that a local authority will have to grapple with is the expectation that charging points will be put in lampposts along streets going into the future as well. Look at the incredible cost. Who's going to do that? Well, the electricity companies won't do it. They're going to expect the local authorities to do it. Will you get money to do it? I doubt it. But the expectation will be there to do it. So the cars are an issue. We expect in the future that there will be fewer. They won't be completely right, these futurologists, but I think they will be partly right. But remember, people before cars every time, because the cars ain't in the garages. If the cars were in the garages, I'd be a bit more sympathetic to that. As regards photovoltaic panels, we put up very few of them at the time when it was 45 pence per kilowatt hour that you could get them. At the time the panels were very expensive anyway. The vast majority we put up were when it's 13 pence per kilowatt hour of electricity generated. If you want to get the most out of your panel, it's a lifestyle. It's a bit like living in these modern buildings, you know, these breathable buildings. You have got to adapt your lifestyle to get the maximum benefit. If you have more than one appliance on at a time, yeah, you're right, Simon, you won't get the benefit of the panel. Or it only works properly, or even when there's sunlight and it's one appliance at a time. If you're running more than one appliance, yeah, you don't get the same benefit at all. As regards to money, the profit that we make in them, well, for 7 months a year we make a significant loss in them. Significant loss, which is balanced off then by the 5 months between, say, May and September, when we will absolutely make a surplus on them. We have a business plan, and the business plan says it'll take us 20 years to pay for the panels because we put some money on at the one time. So there isn't a surplus to redistribute because the surplus pays the debt on the cost of putting the panels on in the first place. And if the people want to maximise the benefits, it's one appliance at a time, I'm afraid. Because they're great, but they're not particularly efficient. I mean, they're getting more efficient as time goes on. But at the time that we put them on, they weren't particularly efficient. We've all sorts of issues with shading. Once a bit of shading, you don't get the benefit of the panel. So we're all the time looking at them, and we monitor them all the time to make sure that we can try and help the tenants maximise the benefits. And then the last one about the officers and the emails. Simon, you had a meeting with one of our officers this week, and it was absolutely clear that at the last meeting you stood up and you said we had made contact, and we had made a lot of contact. And you know that because you met with one of our officers this week and it happened and you know it and you saw the string of emails, you know that's the case. And I'm sorry, Chair, but I think that's a little bit out of order if you've seen the emails to saying council we haven't contacted.
Okay, thank you. Chairman, may I respond to that?
No.
I can't
sit down,
respond.
Simon. Point of order, Simon. Please sit down. Simon, we're not having an argument. Not in my council.
Thank you, John.
Thank you, Simon.
Right, Councillor Francis Taylor.
Hello, good afternoon, John. Thank you for your presentation. I just have two questions for you, if I may. The first one is about lifetime homes. So there's been quite a lot of interest, in the press I've read recently, and I just wondered, I heard what you said about trying to look at different models, models which would allow families to potentially live in homes and have mixed communities, but that adapt for the lifetime of the people who live there, rather than the old model, which was to build distinct, family homes and then maybe older people's bungalows, as we have kind of currently. And I wonder to what extent Monmouthshire Housing Association is looking into that kind of more different and potentially more innovative and more flexible model of house building. So that's the first question. And then the second question is, with regards to the matter of loneliness and isolation, we know that's pretty much, it doesn't just affect older people, but it is a bit of an epidemic, and we do have an issue with isolation in some of our communities where we don't have, good quality public transport that enables people to get out and about as they might like to. And I note, by another means, I sit on the project board of Frindy Me with a friend of mine, which is a health board, I suppose, facilitation initiative around loneliness, isolation. And we have a lot of housing associations there, but I don't believe that Monmouthshire Housing Association is engaged in that in any way, and I just wondered if I could make some contact with you outside of this to see whether there are any opportunities for sharing good practice and innovation and involvement. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely fine. I'll deal with the second one first, if you don't mind. As regards we're on all sorts of groups with health. The particular one I'm on is to do with mental health. Of course, those people suffer significant isolation. So what I do is I give housing advice to the NR and Bevan Mental Health Board about housing issues, about how we can help. So we, along with that board, and we build specific accommodation, for example, for people who would otherwise be isolated. But contact me about those other groups outside, because we could probably send these officers who deal specifically with isolated people along, and they can help out as well. So we'll definitely help out with that group. As regards lifetime homes, everything we build is lifetime homes. So for the benefit of members, that means slightly wider doors. So if you become wheelchair bound, you can continue to move around the house. With showers, the toilets can be adapted so that we can put in a wet room rather than have a bath. We will put tracking on the ceilings of all the properties if need be. We have no waiting list for DFGs in our properties for disabled facility grants. Any tenant of ours who needs one will get one. And I know that the local authority have increased their budget here on DFGs, haven't you? About 900,000 something now? Yeah, close to that, yes. I mean, there shows a significant commitment. So I think both of us are responding to the demographics to make sure that people can stay in homes. There's two aspects of the isolation. One is staying in your local community. Then you've got some help. And that's where we can physically help with the adaptations. The second one then is the interpersonal help, which is the human contact. And yet we've got people dealing with that. But probably one of these things, the isolation is growing, but the resource to deal with it remains constant. So you're right, we've got to be more innovative. Certainly as regards we have computers in the community for older people so that they can start using things like Facebook. Well, I suppose Facebook's a dirty word now, isn't it? But stuff like that to make sure they can remain in contact with far-flung family members. So we've done a lot up in Raglan in particular, but we'll spread that out. We're dealing with older people all the time. We've got a lot of people working. We've got 7 support workers. A lot of the time they are dealing with older people trying to reduce their isolation. Okay.
Thank you, John. You've got just 2 more questions. Next one is Dimitri Petroni.
Thank you, Chairman. I don't know if I declare an interest, but I'm the County Council's representative on the board, giving John a hard time every time.
Both of us are enjoying it.
I want to talk about the broader picture. I've got local issues as well, but I take the Chairman's advice on this. But I'm more interested in the broader picture about Monmouthshire, about land, about house prices. I've got the latest house price market report in front of me here. So the average house price in Monmouthshire is £312,000. In Wales, it's 190. The average new build price is £388,000. The average price in the region is 248. The average house in Monmouthshire to sell is 8.6 weeks, where the average in Wales is 12.5. People achieving their asking price and above is 98.7 in Monmouthshire, where in region it's 95. Which is the key one for me is earnings to price ratio is 8.1. And going up. I view it personally, I know the Labour group does, as a crisis. We're at epidemic levels. I've discussed with you about, and we've agreed as a council about looking at the idea of a local housing company. And you talked about working together about basically dealing with a huge social bomb. Well, I think it's already exploded, to be honest. I want your views on that, particularly with your 10 years now. I think we're in for a whole new world of problems in the next 10 years. How do you see it, John?
Yeah, so our forward build programme is 500, but the 500 is dictated by the supply of land, not by our ambition. So if there's more land, we build more. Only the Dutch are making more land, nobody else does. So really then some hard decisions have to be made. I would say though, Monmouthshire is an ambitious county council. All of the stuff they read demonstrates that people here are aware. There's no denial, I think, within this council, which is more than can be said for some, I'm afraid, that there isn't a massive problem that needs to be done. Some really difficult things like are new settlements required? How do you fill in land around the edge of towns? There's always a public backlash because once you have a home, it's somebody else's problem who doesn't. And there has to be a kind of almost like a public social conscious acceptance that actually a lot more housing is required, and that's where local members come in. And to tell the truth, that's a tough one for local members because no matter where you go, it's not popular because housing is all for somebody else, not for you. So that is a tough one for members. But I think if there's a new LDP before too long, isn't there? Yeah, review. So that should bring forward another few years' supply of land. Then the issue for the likes of us, who will go down low-cost home ownership, who will try and make it affordable, how much of that can we get? The interesting thing, sorry, Leader, Demetrius, tell me about this local housing company. Well, that's where things like joint ventures come in, where we share a risk. If you've got land, can we share a risk? Where you help tackle some of the crisis, get the benefit of sorting out some of the crisis, but also get some of the benefits of maybe some monetary value as well because of the other cuts that you suffer. So when we say that we want to work in partnership with local authority, that is true. Part of that, Dimitri, is about having the money, part of it's having the skill, but part of it's also highlighting where we think land should be freed up for development. If we can free up more land, Councillor Petruni will know that we're talking about refinancing at our board at the moment. We're caught in a bind. We would like to refinance, but the only reason it'd be worth a while if a lot more land becomes available onto which we can spend any additional money. But there's no point us refinancing at the moment because no extra land available. The land that does become available, for example, in Roggett, well, we got wiped out on our bid. Do you know what I mean? So we went out to a valuation company and a private developer to help us price that land. But the bigger boys can just wipe it out every time on price. Every time. So how can we get in a situation where we can get our hands on land at a reasonable price where we can share the risk? And we can get to that, yeah, we will build. The other issue is, will supply itself, supply alone solve the problem? Interesting, Kelly's moving on to city region. Well, of course, the city region's a real success, even more demand is created again. On the other hand, well, what's the city region for? The city region is to make you become a victim of your own success, I would suggest. We want better paid jobs, don't we? Coming into the region, and that will, better paid job will attract more people. But if we create distinct communities that we can develop into great communities on more land, well then I think we can do something incredible. If I was to accuse local authorities of anything in Wales, maybe outside of Cardiff at the moment, is lack of ambition as regards what they're going to do about housing. But I think in this local authority there's certainly an increasing feeling from us, I've got to say, Councillor Petruni, that people here absolutely want to do something, understand what needs to be done, and the resolve to do something about it. But that is going to take time. But when that time comes, we will be ready with the money and the expertise to help out. I guarantee you that.
Thank you, John. To wind up, Councillor Fox, please.
Yeah, thank you, and thank you, John. And I haven't got any complaints to make. I absolutely recognise Dimitri's points there, and it's a dilemma we all are very, very concerned about, and it's a growing problem. But I think I also support your answer as well. It's about how we work together and how we tackle the journey together, and how we as members are brave enough to embrace the things we need to do, the things we have a responsibility to do as community leaders in actually tackling this problem. Because you're quite right, we can speak fine words, but when it comes down to houses coming near us, we turn native. So we've got to really think seriously hard about how we work collectively together in addressing that problem going forward. And there must be solutions that we can deliver jointly going forward. So I want to explore those further as we move forward. We need new ideas to tackle new problems. Needing local homes for local people is something really, really important. and we've got to do all we can. Most of us here have family members, or we know many families who have young people who will need affordable housing options going forward, and we are nowhere near satisfying those, and we do really need to do something about that. And I'm pleased we're reviewing our LDP, and hopefully we can put some changes in policy and different things to make us make some positive steps forward. John, I was proud to be part of this organisation when we helped to make the decision, or rather to help tenants make their decision to move to into stock transfer. I've seen nothing but improvement in the housing stock in my areas year on year, and I'm impressed with the speed that work gets done when it's needed as well, and I've been impressed in the quality of the work that has happened. We would never in this world have had a housing stock of the quality is now if it had been left with this council. Not knocking the council, it's just we wouldn't have been able to unlock the resources that you've been able to do. We wouldn't have been able to move at the pace that you've managed to do. So there are always going to be other sides and individual concerns and complaints and things where we all strive to do the best we can for our residents. But on the whole, I think it's been a success. And I'm really pleased to have been part of it, and I think our tenants are. I've rarely, as in 11 years as leader, have I had a letter in my in-tray complaining about MHA. I've had many positive messages about MHA through my work within the community. So thanks for coming along today, John, and hopefully, Chairman, perhaps we can set something up in the autumn where we can have a bit more of a focused conversation with John and the organisation about some of the things which members have perhaps alluded to today. So, you know, it's great to have that strong working relationship where we can get through these things together, because we need to be a partnership as we move forward to address the problem. Thanks, John.
Well, thank you very much, John. Thank you for coming. Worked with you for 9 years, and it's still a pleasure having you in here.
Thank you all very much. Appreciate it.
Yeah. We're going on to item. Hold on, we've got Keegan-itis. We're going on to item 8.2 now, the government's arrangements for the proposed alternative delivery model. And I think Bob Greenland's going to lead us in that one.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Well, another of the reports on the ADM, but perhaps we should no longer be calling it the ADM, because we see the title here of the Monmouthshire Life Groups. Now, this is a title, if members haven't heard it before, we were looking for a name as a banner to launch these services under, and actually it was far more difficult than it was anticipated to be, because when suggestions came in from members of staff, many of these names had already been taken. This name hadn't, and we felt, or it was felt to be appropriate as a name going forward. So that's why we see Mon Life coming forward on these reports. And what we're being asked to do today is to agree the governance arrangements moving forward. It's time now to consider the shadow movement of these services. If we are eventually to take the decision in council, which we'll be asked probably in October to do, then we will have had to have in place a shadow board or shadow boards to take these services forward. And you can see in your papers the chart which shows how these will be delivered. That's the charity, which is called Mon Life, and that will eventually have a trading company below it. And then there's the Teckle company on the other side. And I know we've had explanations of the Teckle company to members before, but I think it's probably appropriate this afternoon that officers will come in and describe again what the Teckle company does and why it is there. And that in turn will have a trading company to look after that. Now the charity if you look below, will be responsible for leisure, outdoor education, youth services, the TIC Chepstow, attractions and museums, whilst the local authority trading company, the Teckle company, will be responsible for countryside green leisure, infrastructure, teams, strategic tourism and play. The proposal is that within, let's deal with the local authority trading company first. It is proposed that the chair of the board of that company will be the chief officer, and then there will be 2 other officers within that board. This company is an executive function of the council, and therefore it will have the executive or members of the executive, the cabinet, supporting that in the committee for it. On the other side of the organisation, we will have the charity and its trading company. And what we're looking for here are skilled people who are prepared to come into the, onto the board to offer their services. And we know that we're very rich in Monmouthshire in a number of people who have got high management skills. And I don't think that we're going to have too many problems in bringing forward volunteers to take on these roles. And they will add enormously to the efficiency of what will become a commercial organisation. Although a commercial organisation which is managed at arm's length by this council. And it is appropriate, therefore, that on the board of that, that charity and the trading company are a couple of members from this council. You know, it doesn't have it in the recommendations, but what I'm going to propose is this, that we seek 2 members of the board, that we will invite members of this council to put their names forward together with their CVs so that it can be established if they are the right people to move onto the board. I would suggest to council that we should seek 1 member from the controlling group and 1 member from the opposition. And the determination, if there are more, well, first of all, we may not get members coming forward who offer the skills that we need, but on the assumption that we get more than 1, then we will need to determine which members go forward. And I am suggesting that a small panel be set up consisting of the chief executive, of the leader of the council and the leader of the opposition to make those appointments. So I would add that as an additional recommendation to the to what we have in front of us. I'm sure that members will be having some questions on what we have in front of us. We have officers here who are ready to answer those questions. And so, Chairman, perhaps we can open it up to members' questions at this stage.
Thank you, Rob. Councillor Petroni.
Yes, Chairman, thank you. And I know the Cabinet member, I briefly had a brief conversation with them about some of my issues, which I'm going to elaborate further, and I also spoke to a few of the officers. But 3 questions or queries, concerns. First, can I just accept what the Cabinet Deputy Leader has just said about charity trading company having 2 elected members if they have the right skills on the board. That's much welcome because it's not in this document, as I explained to him. So I want to speak about the Teckle company and the governance structure for that. So as the Deputy Leader explained, it is an executive function as outlined here, where there's a board and sitting next to it is a shareholder committee, which can only be filled by a cabinet or a committee, a subcommittee of the cabinet. On the board itself will be mainly senior officers, obviously some outside help as well, maybe businessmen of some kind, and we're uncomfortable with that. We are uncomfortable that basically it's officers the cabinet, or even a smaller portion of the cabinet, who basically call the shots on that. It's not clear how everyone else is involved or even made aware of what is going on. Given the critical nature and given it's taxpayers' money on the line, I don't think that's acceptable. Okay, you know, the cabinet, I'm not saying the cabinet aren't capable, I'm not saying the officers aren't capable, but it's about scrutiny, it's about the mechanisms by which you are held to account for the decisions made in that arrangement, and we are uncomfortable with that. So that's the first query, concern. Second one is the Articles of Association. I'm probably the only sad enough member to have read them all. No, thank you, Joe. Maybe Joe has as well. I asked the officer for them and I read them, and I went through all the various points, and I have two questions relating to them on the separate Articles of Association for the separate trading companies, so stick with me here. So first question relates to the Monmouth Trading, which I believe is the charity subsidiary trading group. And it's section 19, where it says records of decisions to be kept. Again, this is about scrutiny. Directors must ensure that the company keeps a record in hard copy form for at least 10 years from the date of decision recorded relating to any issue. Fine. Next, following section 20, director discretion to make any further rules. The directors may make any rule which they think fit about how they take decisions and about how such rules are to be recorded or communicated for other directors. Is 20.1 subject to 19.1? Because otherwise 20 sort of says the director has carte blanche to make any new rules and then decide how they are recorded, which I don't find acceptable. So I just want some further clarity on that. On the other trading company, Monlife Plus Trading, I hope you're still with me, it talks about capitalization of profit. And I've had a few discussions with officers about that. Why would we need to do such a function when the only shareholder would be us? It would make sense if there was multiple shareholders, but why if there's only one shareholder? The only conclusion I can come to logically is that we hope in the future that we to bring in other shareholders into the venture, which is might be something the council wants to do, but that hasn't been really kind of clear, and something I would be very hesitant, and I know the Labour Group would be very hesitant about, basically bringing in private sector shareholders, which would change the dynamic of the company. And if that's the further ambition, or you want to leave the space for that, that should be made clear.
Chair, I think probably I'll hand over to officers, but I think first of all perhaps the explanation for the Teckle company might actually help with this as well.
Thank you, Councillor Greenland. Thank you, Councillor Petroni, for the questions. I think I'll take them in order, and I'll bring in and offer that explanation around the Teckle company. So, a Teckle company, to all intents and purposes, is the authority. In effect, it's delivering authority services, but it has its own governance arrangements around that. There are flexibilities afforded around a Teckle company in terms of, I guess, the non-local authority trade that it can look to undertake, and there are restrictions around that. The report obviously clearly outlines the services which are going to be which will be positioned within the Teckle company, and adjacent to that, those which will be sat within the charity arm. And I think through the process that we've been through, I think member briefings, I guess the full business case being brought in front of council, that's been explained, and the reasons as to why the charity company has been set up and what flexibilities that affords those services as distinct from those in the Teckle company. In terms of your point around why the executive, and I guess a concern in terms of I guess officers being the makeup of the board, and the shareholder being in this case the executive and the cabinet. You raised a point there just in terms of, I'm using slightly different words, openness, transparency, scrutiny, okay? Bear in mind, as an example, the executive and the shareholder would look to receive an annual business plan. That would be presented to the executive as shareholder by the board on an annual basis. That will come in and sit on a cabinet agenda, and as is normal in due process, there would be pre-decision scrutiny on that. I would naturally expect that to be Economy and Development Select. So clearly there will be effective and appropriate scrutiny over those decisions. There will be clearly other matters that will need to be brought in front of the shareholder, and that they will actually be determined and defined as we go through this process of obviously updating and finalising the legal documents. And probably useful for me at that point just to explain process here. So the decision that was taken by Council a number of months ago to proceed to develop and draft all associated legal documentation to bring into being the associated governance arrangements. We have had a subsequent cabinet meeting, which has obviously looked to bring forward and outline those governance arrangements, and one element of that is what's been brought in front of Council today. From this point forward, the current, and this is based on the current timelines we're working towards, we will be looking to go back into audit committee. We've already been in once in order to brief audit committee and to give them an overview of the legal documentation that is currently in draft, and principally, and points you've referred to and I'll come on to, and this is an important point, the Articles of Association and other legal documents that you've seen sight of to date are generally pro forma that have been offered by Anthony Collins, legal advisor to what was ADM and now Mon Life. Our role now as a local authority is to work with Shadow ADM team to basically negotiate, refine and define those legal documents so they are fit for purpose both for us as a council and also for the ADM in taking us to a point where we bring those in front of council, currently targeted for October. But as I said, we will be looking to go to Audit Committee in September. Audit Committee have an important role in terms of making sure that they provide their views on the legal documentation, the performance and evaluation criteria that are associated and sit alongside those. Subsequent to that then, there will be an Economy and Development Select Committee with a full member invite, and that will be ahead of it going into Council for approval. In terms of the points that you raise on the Articles for Association, in terms of the point around whether directors' decisions and documents needing to be retained for 10 years, and then the subsequent point that you refer to and the flexibilities afforded, that flexibility in terms of directors' discretion to make further rules, that's really about how they take decisions. And again, let me just reiterate the point. That was based on the pro forma document, the standard document that lawyers will offer forward as a first position, and it's the base from which you work. I don't envisage that will be the final form of the documentation, and we will clearly look to refine that. In terms of your latter point, which was around the capitalisation of profit. If your point was referring to the tackle trading arm, again, it'll be negotiated through, but my expectation, or certainly our positioning around this, will be for any profit or headroom generated on the delivery of those services through the tackle company to be returned back into the local authority as shareholder and the executive.
Thank you, Peter, for that. Coming back on that, on the recommendation it says to approve the proposed governance arrangements. It doesn't say this is the first draft for further honing. So it's not very clear that this is a pro forma, a situation where you, us, the Cabinet refine it to tailor it to the Monmouthshire's needs or wants. It says approve proposed governance arrangements. So in that sense, I feel like there's a disconnect of what we've been proposed to vote for and what is actually happening. And secondly, on the TECL, is there no model whereby, I know you've described the normal process of Cabinet, but say Cabinet decided to close its doors to just have private cabinet meetings. Not saying you will, but if any future cabinet would decide to do that, I know there's economy of development, but there's just sort of closes down a bit. Is there no arrangements across the country where opposition member from one of the oppositions is either observer on there, any kind of form whereby some independent scrutiny out of the senior office and executive could have a role?
Chair, if I can just answer the latter part of the question. I think going back to the process described about the executive taking decisions, there are some really important principles there, and I think you do raise a good point, Councillor Petruni. But if Cabinet decided to close down and have closed meetings, that would be a problem for much more than just ADM. That would be a general principle to consider. And I think I am aware of examples, particularly in the housing world, actually, where there are tackle delivery vehicles through arm's length management companies for housing, where greater involvement of opposition members has been facilitated, where they've had panels that frequently meet and feed in to that decision making which is taken by the executive. So there are some freedoms and flexibilities that could be developed around this to create that richer picture which I think you're referring to. And of course, as Peter says, you know, what we're talking about here doesn't replace or negate scrutiny, which I would envisage to feature very prominently in this picture, particularly in those very early days and early weeks and months.
Councillor Watts. Sorry, Paul.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chair. Just to clarify, and in terms of what's being brought in front of members here for approval today, when we refer to governance arrangements, we are talking about the associated board makeup and compositions and the process that we're looking to run through there. So it's as Councillor Greenland sort of outlined in his opening address. In terms of the legal documentation, and as I confirmed earlier, that is what will be brought through the process in terms of Audit Committee, Economy and Development Select, and then through to Council for formal and final approval in October.
I hear what Kelly said, but until that's in here, where the opposition have a greater role in a tackle company, we won't be able to back it.
Okay, Councillor Watts now, please.
Yes, Chair. I appreciate all the points regarding the Articles of Association, but I guess it wouldn't be uncommon then if the performance of this vehicle became untenable or became controversial. What happens then with the shareholders, which are effectively the public? Who's representing the shareholders if they want to dismiss then, say, the directors of this company? Have we examined carefully, obviously the authority's gone to take legal advice through, I believe, a company based in Birmingham, and they probably, cut and pasted effectively what they've done elsewhere, which was probably a standard good practice. But have the legal officers examined the potential for conflicts of interest by having, say, the Cabinet, who are representing effectively the public, and then operating a standalone separate company? You have a legal, I've been a director of a company, you have a legal responsibility to ensure that company is protected, and your first and foremost responsibility is to that, not the public. It does concern me, and I haven't really heard any specific answers.
We've discussed with Anthony Collins and also soon to be replaced, but our head of legal monitoring officer. And in terms of the arrangements, they are very experienced in advising local authorities in terms of such structures. Like you, I've raised those questions in terms of conflict of interest and wanted to make sure that they are appropriately managed. And we've had an advice note, which I'm very happy to share, which will provide the necessary clarification. It's reasonably detailed, but it gives me the satisfaction that we've got appropriate cover over that. But I think importantly, and in terms of the means and mechanisms of managing any potential conflicts of interest, that will be brought together and brought into being within the legal documentation that will subsequently be brought forward, and clearly members will be able to scrutinise that and offer their views into the process that I've described.
Thank you, Peter. Councillor Taylor.
Thank you, Chair. Probably just a couple of points of clarification, if I may. So, understanding the sort of broad technical position of why, this option has been reached. What I'm not 100% clear on, so it's been helpful to have that bit of clarification. I think I probably was expecting in these governance arrangements for it to be set out where this would be scrutinised. So, for example, which select we would anticipate these reporting to and on what basis, because obviously this is a new venture for the council. And so perhaps I would have expected for this to see, certainly as this develops, for it to be reporting for economy and development select on a given time frame, perhaps that's set out in this paper. And perhaps it would be really helpful and perhaps give members assurances if that could be included in the next iteration that comes to various places. I appreciate that it's been through a whole range of audit and democratic services, but I think if I'd have been there, I would have probably asked for that to come in this paper. That's the first thing. The second point is, so when we come to the future generations assessment, effectively what it says is all of this is going to be so much better when it's delivered through this particular meal. So, for example, it says, I won't quote it exactly, but it says that our engagement with the communities are known to be much better through alternative delivery models. My question is why and how, really? And that goes for, all the kind of claims about basically we'll have much healthier communities because we'll be delivering it through this new means, it says. It'll be more equal because we'll be engaging with those people that we currently find hard to reach in our offer. So my question is why? Because effectively we're going to be taking the same staff to be doing, I appreciate that there will be changes as we go, but, why and how, really? That's okay. Thank you.
So just in terms of the first question, that was made reference to in the report that went through Cabinet. Yes, I appreciate not referenced in this report, and yes, we will look to make sure that that's obviously included in future correspondence, and I guess in terms of the minutes of the council meeting we can look to capture that, absolutely. In terms of the second point, and I'm just looking up into officers at the back, and I'm not sure as to whether Ian Saunders, who's a lead officer for the ADM, as to whether he wants to offer a view. He's just sat behind you there, Councillor Taylor. Just to offer that view, and certainly from my perspective, and this is just at a headline, the flexibilities that we're looking to afford services that are being moved across to the ADM, and the whole case that has been brought forward for transfer. Those flexibilities and I guess that further reach that we can have out into our communities to make that difference, extending I guess the offer that is in place at the moment, and that really underpinned where we'd got to, and Ian I'm sure will use similar but probably different words. We'd sort of got to the end of the road in terms of a sustainable model for delivery of these services. And very much why we had to consider an alternative means of delivery. And it's for that very reason that we've obviously got to continue that sustainable model of delivery. And that involves obviously meeting all the targets and goals that we've set out both in the wellbeing plan and the corporate plan as well. And this is the means by which we can look to sustainably achieve that. So I don't know, Ian, as to whether you want to make further comment.
Yeah, thanks, Pete. Just to say, really, obviously, when we've gone through all the business case and we've discussed the why, we've gone into some of the things that Peter said around how these services are not sustainable in their current fashion. We know that to give these the optimum areas to succeed, we've got to sort of change the way we deliver the services. So I think lots of different things have gone into the business case. Obviously, it's a long, extensive document, and there's a massive section around how we intend to do things slightly in a different way. I think a lot of it is about bringing resources together, thinking about our offer and getting it more refined, because at the moment it's disparate, it's in different areas, and lots of managers doing what they think is the best thing. But I think together, if we get the offer correct, things that you talk about community engagement, going out more, being more engaged, certainly in your ward in Mega, I think you will see some of those benefits quite early on in the alternative delivery model. But clearly, we've still got a long way to go. We know we need to improve our marketing and our comms strategy, which is all in development now. So you will see some better engagement.
Thank you.
It doesn't set that out. It doesn't set that out in here. You know, it kind of leaves us to imagine why. So if we're going to make those claims, it would be really helpful to clarify why, because otherwise it's just words in a box, really. That's what. But if you're talking about that, you just described how it might help. I would think that it would be helpful to see that on paper. Thank you, Ian.
Thank you for those comments. And obviously we have done extensive work on the business case, which is a really lengthy document. We haven't brought that today because this is about governance and and the box, we have filled the box on the future generation. And hopefully, obviously we haven't done it as well as you'd have expected, but we have attempted to do it for this particular paper. But it's not, this particular part was about governance today.
Thank you. Councillor Howarth, please.
Thank you, Chairman, for allowing me to speak. Can I just ask a couple of questions there? And I think it's quite clear now that when the final document does come before us quite soon, I think members are making it very clear here we need everything which we are talking about today in there. I'd just like to say I'm still on board with this, and I think many members are. I think biggest criticism I'm having, and it will come under governance, I think it's quite right for me to say today, is members of the public out there are watching, they are concerned, but one of the biggest feedbacks I do have is who will be setting fees and charges. You go out there into Wales and into England and look at models out there, and there's large criticism of models out there, and there's good criticism. Well, there's good vibes about certain models out there. So we are in the middle there. I and many others want the best for Monmouthshire, and if this model will work, it'll be great. I don't want to see facilities cut, and I don't want to see us to go back to what we have at the moment. We need to go to the 21st century with delivering many aspects of what we deliver good. We need to go to the next level, and this will do it great. So I'd like to see in the final document who will be setting fees and charges, because the biggest criticism out there is they seem to increase greatly when new models are set out. And I'd like you to do a bit of work on that and give us who's going to do that and what say we will have as an authority in setting that within the government's document. Because if it's not good, Chairman, I won't be agreeing to it.
I'll just offer a very brief response. Absolutely, just in terms of the management agreement and the grant agreements that wraps itself around the telco company and the charity, that would clearly outline responsibilities, levels of control that the authority has in each respective setup, and naturally that would be born from the pretty extensive legal documentation that we will look to bring together. And let me just re-emphasise the point. We are amidst a process here. The decision here today is around, going back to Councillor Petruni's point, this is around governance structures aligned to board arrangements. We are sort of in train here, behind the scenes in working up all that legal documentation. And again, as I've described, we will be bringing that in front of members in terms of scrutiny and then through for decision later on in the year. And it is when you see that detail, then clearly you have the opportunity to raise such points. And clearly, if members are feeling that there needs to be strengthening in certain areas, then clearly we can have that discussion and take that on board as part of the process.
Thank you, Councillor Green, do you wish to come in at the end? I've got two other speakers. Yes? Yeah, Councillor Debbie Blakeborough, please.
Thanks, Chair. When reading the report, because this is a report on the governance side of things, it does show layers of arm's length governance, which I'm nervous about. And I guess my question builds on Councillor Watt's line of questioning about accountability, because it is public money at the end of the day. So I guess I want clarity, and my question is specific. Under this new system, who is ultimately responsible when things go wrong? What I need to know is whose feet do we hold up to the fire?
In terms of the tackle company, the fallback there, it is in effect the local authority. So you've almost got to view it as as if they are local authority services in their own right. It's got its own governance wrapper. We've just discussed that. Certainly, in terms of the charity, we've got to understand here. These services are going out. Yeah, so you need to understand that we will need to make sure that we, in the construct of the legal documentation, that we are comfortable. But we need to understand you as an authority in terms of how much control we have and how much control we are able to exert. So, the report talks about, a board that's made up, a charity board that's made up of 9 directors. There is 2 local authority representatives on that. Okay, so that we have a voice, but we hold the charity to account through the grant agreement, in effect. Again, and why October is such a very important point. We need to make sure that the construct of that grant agreement is appropriate and it meets the needs of both the authority and Monmouth.
Can we just hold on, Debbie? We're going to. Kelly's just going to give a word.
Yeah, if I could just clarify something, because I saw some of the reactions then when Peter said that with a tackle company, the local authority would be held to account. And to be clear about this, those services are not going out into the tackle company. Tackle is a procurement exemption that says contracting authorities can award contracts to legal bodies within their own control. Within their own control, I think, is the key phraseology here. And I think that's quite important for us to bear in mind.
Okay, Debbie.
I understand where you're coming from, but it's who do I hold to account? Whose door do I knock on if I'm concerned? Is it Peter Fox? Is it head of the department? Is it Paul Matthews? Who is held to account? Because when you're talking about groups of people or generic committees, nobody's really holding the can.
Well, just to go back to what I was just saying, in terms of the charity, chairperson of the board, and certainly in terms of, I guess, the person who's heading up that organisation. In terms of the tackle, and I guess consistent with my last input, and again Kelly's really, I'd expect that to be again the leader, sitting on the executive as shareholder and cabinet.
Okay, Councillor Jo Watkins.
Thank you. It's just actually to try and get clarity on what we're actually going to be voting on this afternoon, please. It says that we are presenting the draft documentation and then we're approving the governance. So what are we actually voting on? How much of what we are voting on is still in draft format and how much is actually then set in stone by us actually voting? I'm a little unclear and that doesn't feel a very stable place to be.
Thank you, Chairman. It really is quite an interesting debate that we've had, and it raises some quite very valid concerns of members that we've had. But just to be clear, and I think I would wish to amend the recommendation to bring clarity to it. What we are considering here is the issue particularly of the shadow board of the both the TECL and the and the charity to take us forward. We need to move forward now so that officers have the authority to go out and look for these board members. The other issues that have been mentioned are all very valid, and there will be no doubt, as has been pointed out, the opportunity through scrutiny to through further meetings to refine what we're talking about. Councillor Petruni mentioned his issues in the Articles of Association. There is the opportunity to refine those and to make them more specific to what we want to do through the work of the select committees. So what we need to do today is to simply go out and to, and here's a change of wording which I would suggest, to approve the proposed governance arrangements for the Mon Life Group with regard to the shadow board arrangements. So we're not concerned here with the issues of further scrutiny going forward. That will be taken care of. We're simply looking here to approve the arrangements in terms of the shadow board to take us forward at this point. I would imagine that the arrangements for the shadow board will eventually become the arrangements for the full board. But we will have time to go through that at a later date. We need to move on now, and I would suggest that if we use that wording and then we add to it the additional recommendations that I meant in terms of how we appoint the members onto that shadow board, in other words, through inviting members to put their CVs forward and choosing one member from the controlling group and one member from the opposition group. That will take us forward from this point here, unless officers tell me anything to the contrary. And then we can deal with all the issues that members will have over the next, well, not over the next month, but once we come back in September, we can deal with the issues that members have, because the last thing we're trying to do is to not, in fact, what we are trying to do is to be as open and as inclusive as we can. But we are talking in terms of the TECL company about an executive function. And the way this council works is that the executive makes decisions. Sometimes they are subject to pre-scrutiny, but if they're not, then they are subject to call-in. And so every member has the opportunity to take a part and to be able to take their views forward through debate. So that's what I'm suggesting. I'm happy to repeat it again if members are not clear, but I think you will get the idea that we're looking to, in the future, to bring scrutiny into play here to ensure that when we take the final decision, are we going to move forward or not, all of these things will have been fully debated through the various channels that we have within the council.
Thank you, Bob. Paul Pavier, you want to make a quick comment?
Yeah, very short contribution, Chair, just to give colleagues comfort when it comes to scrutiny. It's a shame that there were some challenges around expectation of scrutiny early on in terms of the ADM. I think if we had sat down with officers when the council decided to progress back in February, all the issues raised today would have been ironed out at our meeting in June. But we've reset that relationship now between myself and my Deputy Councillor Davis, who unfortunately is not here. We will be expecting to go over in forensic detail in our next scrutiny session meeting in September, which will be an all-day session, predominantly on the ADM. All members will be welcome, and undoubtedly all these issues will be ironed out. But as I said, it's a shame that we didn't have the opportunity to do that prior to this, and we would have probably made more robust recommendations. and that would have been clear for us. But my expectation is that in terms of onward scrutiny until the implementation process is done, that the Economy and Development Select will be the overarching select committee that will oversee the rest of the scrutiny work. I understand, I appreciate other committees will be doing elements of the work, but until our members are satisfied, we will be watching this very, very carefully. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Bob, do you want to repeat your amendment to the clause on recommendation on page 29?
Yes, certainly, Chairman. To approve the proposed governance arrangements for the Mon Life Group with regard to shadow board arrangements and to initiate the shadow recruitment process of company directors. And then the second part, these actions are prior to final council consideration in October 18 to endorse the transfer documents and agreements and subsequently to enact company operation in December 2018. The other part, which is to approve that 2 members from this council, one from the controlling group and one from the opposition group, will be appointed after a selection process. Such selection process to be overseen by the chief executive, the leader and the leader of the opposition, and the final appointment to be made by that panel.
Right. Second that. Yeah, I think it's all seconded and proposed. All those in favour of recommendation 2 on page 29, please show. Yeah, it's carried.
Chairman, we would like it for the against to be counted, please. Like the against to be registered, please.
Yes, please. Those against that proposal. I'm sorry, I should have asked you. 1, 2, 3. Okay, it's still carried. Right, we go now on to item 9. It's the Audit Committee Annual Report. Councillor Fox, please.
Yeah, thank Chairman. I'm just it's a pleasure to invite the chair of the, or would be a pleasure to invite the chair of the Audit Committee to present his annual report, but Mr. Philip White isn't here today, so we'll be inviting Jim Higginson on his behalf as Deputy Chair to present the report. But while I'm on my feet, just want to thank Philip White for his continued work in chairing the Audit Committee. He's been doing this for some years and doing a good job for us. As somebody independent person from outside the council, so we thank him for his efforts and thank the Audit Committee for their efforts as well. So, Mr. Chairman, if you were happy to hand over to Councillor Higginson to present Mr. White's report.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chairman. Thanks, Leader, for the comments you made. Without a shadow of doubt, Mr. Philip White is a good acquisition for this council as a chairman of this committee, and he makes life very easy for the committee members. And it's a difficult act to follow sometimes as vice chair. But there's a recommendation in there, and I would repeat it as it says. On behalf of the Audit Committee, I submit this annual report for 2017-18 to 2017-2018 for consideration by the Council. And as he says, he believes that it shows that over the period the committee has fulfilled its role as defined in terms of reference. It shows the workings of the committee that continue to be both valuable and productive, and it provides assurance to the Council regarding the committee's activities in the effective governance of financial affairs and other matters by the authority. And it is a very investigative committee, and sometimes it's some things, as I said, are hard to take, but that's how it is, and that's how the committee sees it. So I do present this to Council, Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. Does anybody wish to raise any points on this report? Mr. Councillor Pavia, can you switch your microphone on, please? Right, as moved. Okay, it's moved. All those in favour, please show. It's carried. Thank you. We now go on to reports of the Chief Officer for Social Care and Safeguarding and Health. I gather, Jane, you're going to take us through this one. Item 10.1. No. Okay, Paul, you do that. Sorry, Paul. Sorry, Jane. You pass that along so everybody knows who he is.
Although I'm quite happy for Jane to do what she wants to. Can I beat the esteemed Chief Executive of MHA for brevity? I suggest I can. Members, you'll be aware that ordinarily this report is presented to you by our Chief Officer for Social Care. You would also be aware that we're not in a transitionary period. Julie Boothroyd is our incoming Chief Officer and she's taken up post, but she's not here today. The report was drafted by Claire Marchant just before she left. This report is an important one, not only because it tells the story of our service, but it's the story as told by your Chief Officer, not your Chief Executive, not anybody else. It's a personal report. So I could have asked Claire to come back to present it to you, but that didn't really seem particularly fair. I think the report is well scripted. It feels like a very honest appraisal to me of where we find ourselves. It tells the story across 36 months, certainly on the children's side, of a service that is significantly stabilised. As a head of paid service, the opportunity to potentially have a fully permanent staff in children's services. I don't know, Jane, whether that makes us unique in Wales, but if it does, it will be close to. And off that platform, all sorts of opportunities start to present around practice. I guess our continuing issue that we need to stay true to is trying to do something about our ability to recruit more foster carers. We've tried, as yet we've not quite made the inroads that we would wish. But our children's services offer, I think, is in much better health than it was a short period ago. Adult services, on the other hand, has tended to be relatively strong in this organisation, and I think that remains the case. The core issue that we have to confront, in my view, in adult services is the fragility of the domiciliary care market. You know the dynamics of Monmouthshire, as do I. High employment and the value that we attach to the foundational economy, care, is not necessarily recognised by the salaries that carers can command. The fragility of the market for us, particularly in the north of the county, continues to present problems, and it's problems that we're going to have to find mechanisms to work our way through. I think, members, I would present the report to you as is. If you have specific questions, what I've agreed with Claire is I'll take your questions and I'll speak to her about them, because I think it's fair that she gets the opportunity to offer her colouring, given that it's her report. But if you're happy to accept the report as stands, I know Julie Boothroyd is content to accept it and use it as a platform, along with the comments that she made within her interview process, to advance her work over the course of the next 12 months. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Paul. Are there any questions? Councillor Watts.
Yes, sorry. It's really on a theme that, so whilst the Chief Executive has explained that we are struggling really to meet the demands really of foster care and to find enough foster carers, and I talked in the last full council about the fact that we're in a market and that we're competing against other local authorities and agencies, and that, you know, we're not paying the recommended rate according to BAF, or they've changed their name slightly now because they've become a consortium of charities. Will the council, or will the senior officer, will you be going back and asking them to do things differently, Paul? Because we don't seem to recognise that we're in a market. As I said, we're competing with agencies. We spend a lot of money, a lot of money on agencies. And whilst I fully appreciate that agencies are absolutely necessary, because we haven't got the level of expertise, I guess, in the squad of people that we have within the authority, because there's some of the needs of those children are very, very specific. Surely, overall, we could do a bit more to recruit those people. And simply what I'm saying is, purely from a market perspective, you can cut out the middleman. If you pay more than they do, or simply pay what they close to, if you're providing a better support service, which I actually do believe, I think we do that, will you be going back and explaining that to the senior officer, and will you ensure that she kind of gets it, please?
The answer is a very straightforward yes. Clearly we haven't managed to achieve what we're looking to achieve. We seem to be having some success in attracting more individuals initially to present as potential foster carers, but we're not quite converting. So something isn't happening that needs to, so we need to be doing something else. So the answer is yes, but I won't make policy on the hoof. We have to have an evidence base that underpins what we're going to try and achieve.
Councillor Petroni.
Yes, it's on the data, Paul, on carers' responses and the carers' questionnaire, and it's disappointing to see that carers saying I can do the things that are important to me. We're in the bottom quartile and going down, given that's been the whole emphasis of this council, I don't know, for the last, at least since I've been here. So we're going down on that. We're bottom of I feel part of my community. We're in the bottom quartile, sorry, not bottom. And we're in the bottom quartile. I'm happy with the support from my family, friends and neighbours. And the whole rhetoric from this council is about community, about feeling part of that community, about doing the things that you want to do. And we're all in the bottom quartile, in some areas getting worse. And on performance indicators, and we've been in this situation for a number of years, percentage of assessments completed for children within statutory timescales, we're in the bottom quartile. Percentage of children supposed to remain living within their family, we're the bottom quartile. I mean, it almost feels like, and I know it's not accurate to say it is, but it almost feels like every year we're good at saying the words, we're not good at delivering.
Okay, in terms of well, first and foremost, there's a lot of data in the report. There are a lot of evidence points, and I think that's to be welcomed. An anecdote is a very easy basis to describe a service. Sometimes when you attempt to make it a little bit harder, I think that's commendable, actually. When you introduce as many data points as we have now, I think it would be wonderful to be top quartile green on everything, but I'm not sure that's a statement of reality. I think it's a bit of a curate's egg. There are some very good features of that report card. There are a number of areas that we would want to do better on. I think that the value of the evidence points is it enables Julie, it enables others, including the Cabinet member, to refocus this year's service improvement plan and to see whether we can make additional strides. In terms of most of the core indicators, though, it's my view that we do have a steady state, and on a number of the most important ones for me, we are showing quite pronounced improvement. The one that probably concerns me, I'm concerned by all of the qualitative remarks which say that life circumstances aren't what individuals would wish to see. I'm not looking to negate those in any way, shape or form. I'm not overly a fan of the very cold indicator about delayed transfers of care, but it does tell a story of market fragility for us. It does tell a story that we are struggling to have the care, the depth in the care market that we need in Monmouthshire right now. We can't turn our face to that. So I accept there are some areas that we would like to see stronger performance, but on the whole, when I measure it against a starting point of around 36 months ago, I think the trajectory is positive.
I take your point, and in some areas we are doing really well. I accept that. But for example, the qualitative measures from children and parents and children's responses, I mean, we're in the bottom quartile of nearly all of them and not in the top quartile of any of them. So, for example, children my views about my care and support have been listened to. Bottom quartile, trend, dropped by 6-7%. I mean, that's been our language on social care, correct me if I've been wrong, for years and years, and that's what we've been told. We're listening to people, but you look at this, and it's just red. Qualitative children's responses, red, bottom quartile, trend, downward arrows. I'm just looking for a bit more reassurance, Paul, that's all.
The challenge, Councillor Petroni, is absolutely appropriate. I think the important, I repeat, for purpose, this is not my report. This is your chief officer demonstrating to you an awareness of the system and a very accurate perception, in my view, of where we currently find ourselves. Those qualitative indicators, some of you may struggle with this, but for me, the qualitative indicators are more important than the most of the quantitative. That is our agenda. You'll continue to see this pattern of reporting from this point on going forward, because we want consistency. The language that we use does have a degree of consistency, so we need to convert in some areas that we're not. What we do have, and I'll repeat, I guess, or return to some of my opening remarks, particularly around children, is that we now have stability in terms of our workforce. We don't have agency anymore. We have a model of practice. I think we've seen, if you break out the annual projection, I think if you were to divide the reporting year 17-18 into the first 3 months and the following 9, you see quite significant step change in the following 9. We have some legacy from the early part of that reporting period, and I am expecting to see some further significant improvement during the next reporting period. I would expect the select committees to continue to take the interest that they are, and they have been over the course of the last 18 months, 2 years. Clearly the quantitative side, I guess the surveying side, tends to be annualised, and it's a moment, it's a point, but I'm not looking to avoid those challenges. They're the right ones.
Yep, Councillor Crocott.
Thank you, Chair. The draft report, as it was at that point, written by the head of social care, came before a joint select committee of adults and CYP. At that point, it was not finished. I'm in conversation with chairs of other select committees, told that it's not the first time that a chief officer report has come for scrutiny in an unfinished state. And yet it is a clear statutory duty every year to submit the report. I would ask you as Chief Executive to use your best offices to ensure that those of us who are on scrutiny committees are able to do the job to the best of our ability by having a complete report sent to us when we meet.
I don't know the basis of the document being incomplete. I will make an assumption, but I might be wrong on it. The assumption may well be around data sets. I might be wrong, but data sets are sometimes beyond our control, because we do try to apply points of evidence that aren't just from within this council. But Councillor Grauka, I wasn't at the select committee, so I can't really comment with any accuracy. I know it's not a desire on the part of any senior officer here to provide the select committee with an incomplete report or an absence of an informed view. Maybe I'll read back and find out exactly where things were, so I can satisfy myself.
Thank you for that, Chief Executive. It's really an assurance looking forward that in future, when the senior leadership team of the authority meets, these dates when officer reports are due is quite clear, and that we don't have that again in looking forward. I fully appreciate that Claire had difficulties in getting it to us, but at the same time there was a date, and moving forward I would ask you rather than the director of any of the independent areas to ensure that we get completed reports, and it wasn't just simply around data sets.
It's a fair point, and again, just for clarity, in terms of chief officer reports, the only one that we have which carries a statutory requirement is indeed the one around social care, the one that you're considering today. The other chief officer reports, it's a regime that we've put in place so that chief officers are required to tell you the story of their services. As such, we have discretion in terms of the timing that they come forward, so they should never come forward in an incomplete form.
Okay. We're on page 109, item 10B, and the recommendations are there. Can I have your votes for approval, please? Okay, thank you. It's carried. inadvertently we've passed item 10A, which I was right and I got overtaken by officers. So, Jane, do you wish to take us through that report on safeguarding on page 57? Or you, Claire, Penny? Yeah. All right. Go on there, Penny.
Okay, I'll stand up. Right, well, this report is safeguarding overview address. Sorry, I'll just unstick myself. This report is an evaluation of the whole authority safeguarding activity from September 17 to March 18. It builds on and reflects work that has been done over recent years and is presented in accordance with the commitment to provide a regular 6-monthly update to the Council. The front page of the report provides the overall evaluation scores against each of the cornerstone areas. So the report is then divided into 3 sections. One, the detailed evaluation against our cornerstone measures with supporting evidence. 2, case studies to give an on-the-ground feel as to how safeguarding is working in practice. 3, the action plan arising from our current evaluation, which is taken forward and monitored through the whole authority safeguarding group. The self-assessed evaluation scores are reached within the whole authority safeguarding group through a process of check and challenge and a critical consideration, wherever possible, of data and evidence. In all 5 areas, we've remained stable or slightly improved. Our key strength remains in good governance. There is much evidence now telling us that safeguarding is firmly embedded within the Council, with robust systems in place, identifying and responding to and learning from any safeguarding issues or concerns which arise. The area in which we are at an earlier stage of development is safe services. This concerns ensuring that robust safeguarding is embedded within the Council's commissioning arrangements, grants, partnerships and volunteering activities, using our influence to ensure that all services operating within Monmouthshire promote the welfare and safety of children and adults at risk. We are currently mapping and scoping this landscape using a risk matrix approach and a developed set of minimum standards for working with partners. We are recognising that there are already many areas of excellent practice in this area which we can build on. One thing to note is that at the time of conducting our current self-assessment, we did not have the benefit of the WA report into the review of safeguarding arrangements for children within the Council, undertaken in January 2018. Once we receive the final version, we will be checking this against our self-assessment and reviewing our action plan accordingly. We remain confident that it will be a good read across it. There is never room for complacency within safeguarding, and it is never ever a done deal. However, overall, what we can be assured of within Monmouthshire is that safeguarding of children and adults at risk remains high on the agenda and is well supported by all directorates through the auspices of the whole authority safeguarding group and the oversight of elected members. And I think we should all have confidence in that we all care, and we will work on it to make sure that it is a never-ending successful process. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Penny. Councillor Petroni.
Thank you, Chair. The work on safeguarding has been enormous since the local authority failed in that area, and the new cabinet member, are you still classed as new, maybe, I don't know, is a stalwart in this area. I know she cares passionately about it. I want to post it to her, maybe to the officers, from the qualitative measures of the children, from the children own responses, where it says to the question, I feel safe, the trend says we're dropping. We're in the upper middle, which is good, but the trend is dropping. I just want a bit further commentary on that. Do we know why more children are feeling unsafe in this area? It's quite a hell of a statement for a child to say, isn't it? Particularly these children.
Jane?
I think one thing just to recognise is that was a very specific population of children. So it was children who were already either on child protection plans or who had become looked after. So it wasn't a a question that was posed to the population as a whole. But clearly, I think Paul has said, you know, we welcome the challenge about that. It's really hard in you know, just a few words to say why I think that's dropping. We have it was a question that was discussed quite thoroughly within our select committee as well, and the same kind of challenge was posed. And it is, you know, we have lots of ways that we engage with children. We have lots of measures that tell us a contrasting story to that as well. A lot of our looked after children have permanent allocated social workers who they engage very well with and talk openly with. And similar for our children who are on child protection, you know, registers, we have good, stable, allocated workers. So we hope that if individual children are responding in that way to a survey, it would have also come out within their individual conversations with social workers. Again, one of the difficulties with that survey, which is a particular point in time on a particular cohort of children, we have our own way of approaching the operational delivery of that service, which doesn't necessarily accord with how other Welsh authorities are delivering that survey. So it can depend very much on the cohort of children that you're sending that survey out to at a particular point in time. So it looks like you may be comparing yourself across Wales, but it's not a total accurate comparison. That's not to take away from the challenges it poses to us as a service to really understand more about that and about whether we really do truly get to the wishes, feelings, views of individual young people and children within our service.
That was an interesting response. If it was a question to a set cohort of children, do we issue that kind of those questions to all our children, so we can get maybe a more robust? I think it was well, you didn't say it like that, but that's what you meant, a more robust measure of where we actually are. Is that something we're thinking of or doing, or?
Yes, it's absolutely something that we're thinking of. The way that this survey, the Welsh Government ordered the survey through at a particular point in time, so the children aren't followed in terms of any sort of follow-up to that cohort. It's a different children each time you ask. And it's something, partly because it's the right thing to do, partly because, you know, things like this survey come out. As a service, we've started to really map through all the different ways that we can kind of get a much more qualitative whole service feel for, you know, the views of children and young people. I mean, one of the ways that we're really doing that in a positive way is through the looked after child reviews. One of the things in Monmouth that we pride ourselves on is that what doesn't show up in that data is that in terms of the number of children we have fully engaged with their review process is very high in comparison to other looked after populations within Wales. And we're going to try and start using that in a much more structured way to really try and ensure that they have that individual conversation with the independent reviewing officer to make sure that if they have got any concerns about their safety, welfare, that's picked up through that process, and that should give us a lot more data to draw on rather than those, you know, at a point in time surveys.
Councillor Taylor.
Thank you, Chair. On the theme of reports which seem to be unfinished, so when I was picking up on what Councillor Petruni was saying, as you go through on the safeguarding piece around, you know, where we are, what the RAG rating are, what the further actions are, quite a number of fields in that report appear to be incomplete or have question marks attached to them. I was going to raise some of the issues that Councillor Petruni did, but he raised them very ably. And then I come to, you know, on the issue of robust protection, continue to improve outcomes for children's services throughout the Children's Services Improvement Programme. None of the fields are complete. So an area where clearly we do have significant areas for improvement don't seem to be complete. So I couldn't follow through from this, you know, where we are, what is that RAG rating, and why isn't it complete? So first of all, I don't know why it's complete, but I also just wanted to add that when you go, you know, on the qualitative information from the children, in particular in the cohort of our looked after children, I thought, well, perhaps it's a very small number of children. You know, I mean, I know it's a particular cohort, but actually about half of the children have filled in the questionnaire. So actually, it would seem to be perhaps a lot more significant than at first glance. And then I did think it was slightly concerning. So can we understand why that isn't complete? Can we see it when it's complete? And can we, you know, because I'm hearing from my colleagues that those RAG ratings and weren't present in the joint scrutiny report, as Councillor Grocott highlighted. So that makes it very difficult, I think, for members to be cited on these very important issues in terms of the services, the safe services that we're providing to most vulnerable people in our communities. Thank you, Chair.
The RAG rating is complete in the main report, and it was my error not to transfer the RAG rating action plan report up into the cover report. So it is actually complete, it's just in the actual evaluative report. So apologies for that.
Right, we've everybody's had a voice. We're on page 57 with recommendations there. All those, please show who are happy with the report. Yes, Councillor Howard.
Chairman, may I just say a few words while we are on the points of incomplete reports? I think I've asked for many, many months now, well, quite a few years, that actually any recommendations that we do have, from the selects are actually included within the report. And I do believe that today, now, yes, we can talk about it, we can play whatever we want to play. But if you go back to the Adult Joint Select Committee, it's very clear in there what everything we've said is in the conclusion, in a brief paragraph of that meeting from scrutiny. We've discussed scrutiny today on quite a few topics. Would it not be within our interest as a council to actually just include them as a paragraph, that actually the conclusion of that scrutiny committee is incomplete report, draft, when will the final version be made available? I think it's quite simple, it's not rocket science. I think that would be very important, and I do hope senior officers get that message. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Howard. Right, we're now moving on to motions of notices of motion. Councillor Eason, as you had a report at the beginning of this council regarding street furniture, do you wish to proceed with this motion?
Thank you, Chair. No, I will be withdrawing this motion on the basis that I welcome the decision by Cabinet to discontinue charges for street paraphernalia, which gives support to my motion, and look forward to next week's public consultation at Strong Communities. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Therefore, we go on to item 12 on the agenda, which is a motion from Councillor Petroni. Yes, we're moving.
Thank you, Chairman. Councillors, why have I put this motion in front of you? Sometimes I debate that with myself. No, it's over the last few years, as a 5-6 years now as elected member, we've seen lots of reports, lots of briefings about social mobility, about children getting the best start in life, about what we're doing and some of the great things we're doing. Like I think the Chief Executive mentioned in Cabinet yesterday about Y Apprentice and getting young people in apprenticeships, supported by this authority. And I think a couple of weeks before that, we saw the NEAT strategy, if I remember correctly, and about the wonderful efforts of those officers. But when I read those reports, and as I've stayed elected, I just feel like we're tinkering around the edges. We are not truly, on the broad scale, making a huge difference. We're making great impact in individual lives, and that's something we should be continue to do. But on the broad schemes, we are not making the impact I feel we could make. And that's why I bring this kind of policy idea forward called universal basic income, which is not necessarily a new idea. It's been around for years, and it's spreading across the globe in many different countries with many different political leanings. And it is now taking hold. And I think it's Wales, and I think Monmouthshire, given the language we talk about, wanting to be at the front line of innovation, want to be at the front line of developing stuff that makes a difference. I feel Monmouthshire in Wales maybe should try and take the lead in this area. So what is it, though? I should go back to basics. It's basically where the state, for want of a better word, guarantees the income of a resident, which will meet their basic needs. That will cover their, there'll be no, they won't fall, won't be left behind in terms of housing, in terms of food. So it will cover every basic need of a resident in a country. It's very simple. What that will be is very dependent on the country it's being introduced on and very certain economic measures, but it is costly. There's no way about that. It's absolutely costly. So I would imagine the first response is maybe from the Conservative side, although interestingly in Scotland the Conservatives support it, is cost. Yes, very costly. Offset, actually, by the potential benefits. So we know in Welsh public services alone, poverty and the social ills that unfurl from that, as identified by the economists of the IFS, that we spend £3.4 billion just on, for want of a better phrase, dealing with the social ills that spiral out of poverty. We know that universal credit costs £15 billion to roll out a programme which is meant to give a leg up to those people in benefits to succeed in their lives. And we know that the IT infrastructure and all the costs, but taking all the politics out of it, in essence, it's a computer system trying to track the changes in people's lives as their circumstances change. It's trying to measure their relationship at the time. Have they moved out? What's their illness? And we know with mental health illness that can fluctuate. It's almost impossible to measure. And we know in that area that basically the old welfare system of the 20th century welfare system, where the state tries to understand and know where people's lives change, is redundant in the age we are in my view. It can no longer do it. So why do we do that? Why do we persist in 20th century mechanisms for 21st century realities? That's not even taking into account the gig economy, automation, basically eradicating many jobs. And that's not some leftist, socialist, communist, whatever it might be called, kind of agenda. It is happening now. Jobs from credible, even right-wing economists know that thousands upon thousands, if not millions of jobs will be eroded as automation takes hold. And I think that is why you are seeing actually across the piece of political life, where you are getting a sort of I don't know, maybe not agreement, but a consensus that something has to change, and where we need to think about how we supplement incomes of our residents in the 21st century. So I feel the old welfare system, we track people's lives, an interventionist state is outdated. The bureaucracy, to give you a figure on the welfare bureaucracy, just to sort of measure where people are, so that's not even handing out the benefits, is around the 60 billion mark. So we're already paying out a huge amount. We're already being taxed and paying out. It's not additional money to just fund the bureaucracy, where the joy about universal basic income is there is no assessment. There is no bureaucracy. It is not a civil servant somewhere with a paper marking you out of 15 for your score, whether you're eligible or not. That's all eroded. And it's given to everyone because they're a resident of the United Kingdom. So there's an equality to it, as well as making the basic needs of all residents in that area. And I alluded to Scotland, and they're rolling it out. Well, they're trialling it out, and they're rolling it out in 4 local authorities. So the local authorities are leading the way in this, Scotland. And as I alluded to, it has Scottish Conservative support to trial it. Maybe not the overall policy, and we don't even know what the conclusions are. It might not even work. But that's why my motion talks about writing to the Welsh Government, are you considering it, trialling it? And if so, we're up for it. We're up for giving it a go. And that's where my motion stands. And why Monmouthshire? And again, I've tried to keep all the politics out of this, because actually I think there might be a broadening consensus out of this, because it is less about interventionist state. It's more about enabling people to keep their own money and spend it how they will. And in Monmouthshire, we know, it's a fact of life, even if it was a Labour administration, that we have a generally wealthy population. But amongst all that is a population that are struggling, that are working, that are finding it hard. And actually, when they live in Monmouthshire, I would argue the problem, the issue is maybe exacerbated around social mobility, because they see their peers are better off and maybe get more chances. And so maybe there's a spiral there. So Monmouthshire, in terms of, if you look from a scientific point of view, is a great test case of, actually, can we make a difference to those hidden people in Monmouthshire and bring up social mobility? And we know from free school meal data, and I know there's arguments around that and what we can and cannot do, that our gap is the highest in Wales. And I know there's broad political agreement that's not acceptable. So why don't we do something about it? Anything else pretty much is tinkering around the edges. So that's where I come from, that's why Monmouthshire, that's why local government, because Scotland are leading the way on this. But most of all, I want to turn to the part of work, because someone raised it with me, and it's a legitimate point. Would this disincentivize people working if they received an income and undermine the work ethic? And common sense, I must admit, you think it probably does. But then when you look at the scientific evidence from MIT, not known as a socialist enterprise, the evidence rebukes that. Actually, what you find is most, not all. There will be some people who blow the money on something frivolous. By the way, some people do that now. So you're not eradicating that problem. But at MIT, and I wrote it down, incomes shot up by 38% across all different countries. Because what they found was people use that income, it offered them a level of security, that offered them, if they were self-employed, it leveled out the fluctuation of their employment. It gave them a level of security to either retrain to do something they actually wanted to do rather than work all hours on some job they hated just to make ends meet. Retrain and be more productive and earn more back in their society. It found middle-class people who will still receive this, by the way, it's not only about the poor, middle-class people being able to afford, because they work so hard, the classes, the extra childcare, and ameliorate all those issues, which brings less anxiety to those families as they try to pay for all those extracurricular activities that suddenly maybe might become unaffordable. So we found home ownership shot up by 58%. And maybe the farmers would want to know, in rural areas, the stark improvement was notable.
1 minute left, Dimitri.
With livestock ownership shooting up by nearly 60%. Because I'm no expert, and I'm sure I'll be told off, farming with the drought is such a fluctuating business practice that this will offer, again, a level of security amongst it. So actually, from credible academic sources from across the globe, this could be a cost-neutral policy in the final term on social ills. I can see the Conservatives shaking their head. It can be a cost-neutral perspective. We're spending billions on welfare anyway. And we could lead the way in trialling it with the Welsh Government if they back us. And this is actually all it is asking us to send a letter to the Welsh Government, asking are they thinking about it, and if they are, we're up for it. I'm not even committing us to it, just writing a letter to see if the Welsh Government are up for this. Because in Scotland they are, and why should we be left behind?
Councillor John. Yeah. Oh,
thank you very much.
Before you do that, has anybody seconded it? Councillor Eason, thank you.
Okay. Well, first of all, I want to talk a little bit about the Social Mobility Commission.
As seconder, can I say something?
Do, if you wish to, but it wasn't you, it was Councillor Eason.
I just thought that might
Hold
be...
on, Roger. Councillor Eason is the seconder.
No, it was agreed that it would be me, Chair. Sorry about that. So, right, what a brilliant idea. There's only one slag from your side of the chamber, it's got Welsh Government written on it, and well, there we are. I mean, Dimitri has eloquently put forward the case. I represent one of the most deprived wards in the whole of the authority. Next to me is arguably the most deprived ward in the whole authority. Between those two wards sits the school with the highest level of free school meals in the whole authority. And if by any chance this sort of scheme came to fruition, just think what it would do to the levels of deprivation. It would reduce them vastly, maybe eliminate them in the wards that I know very well. And it's not only in Abergavenny. Big areas of deprivation in Monmouth, the county town. Big areas of deprivation in Chepstow, right on the borders, and also in other major conurbations, Caldicot, etc. What we're saying as the Labour group is that if the Welsh Government is willing to entertain this, then as usual, Monmouthshire is always in the forefront of volunteering. We keep hearing we're the best. Let's go for it again, and I'm happy to second this motion.
Thank you, Councillor Harris. Councillor John.
Thank you. You're absolutely right. There are pockets of deprivation in Monmouthshire, but I think where we disagree is how we tackle poverty, and I'll come on to that in a moment. But first I want to take issue with the first line in the motion, which is implying that there are areas of Wales that are, well, you say, failing poorer children. Well, if
Correct,
you
I don't
actually
say
look
Wales.
at the social...
Correct. Point of clarification, I don't say Wales. I said the report says wealthy areas of failing poorer children.
So there are areas in the, if you look at the Social Mobility Commission's report, which is published, it makes very clear, and I'll quote from it, it says that children entering primary, in the early years, Monmouthshire delivers the best outcomes for young disadvantaged children. Now that's when you look at outcomes for children under the age of 7. And I note that that's referenced in Councillor Petruni's blog that he wrote a few days ago, where he wrote, children entering primary school in Monmouthshire are the most equal, educationally speaking, regardless of income in Wales. And I appreciate you recognise that this carries on throughout primary school. When you look at the figures in the Social Mobility Report for Key Stage 2 and Key Stage 3, Monmouthshire is in the top 4 of 22 councils for results for children who are eligible for free school meals. And I note that the 3 worst performing local authorities are all run by the Labour Party. Monmouth scores second for working life social mobility. The report overall ranks Monmouthshire as the 3rd best local authority out of 22 for social mobility in Wales. Now, Councillor Harris is absolutely right. There are pockets of deprivation in Monmouthshire, and they represent a significant challenge for our school system in terms of ensuring that every child has that equality of opportunity. Now, Councillor Harris and I attended the awards ceremony in Derry View last week, and it was really quite humbling to see some of the awards that young people have received. In particular, I was thrilled to bits to see that the STEM After School Club, which recently competed in the Welsh regional finals of a science competition. They had to make a model car, and it was powered by gas canisters. They came second in that Welsh regional final, and they went on to the UK finals the other day. Those are the sorts of opportunities that are being offered at Derry View, a school which has got 35% of students who are eligible for free school meals. So we really do need to pay tribute to teachers and others who are working really hard in our schools to ensure that young people have the chance to achieve their potential. But you can only invest that time in young people if you've got the resources at your disposal. Now, I'm proud that this year we were able to increase the amount we spend on schools. Even though we've had deep cuts to our budget, the percentage we spend on education has increased this year. Now, while we're doing that, we're facing significant reductions in the grant money going to our schools. So last year, Welsh Government dished out £133 million in education improvement grant. Of that, Monmouthshire received just 2.9 million. That's 2%. The Pupil Development Grant, Welsh Government dished out £91 million last year, and we received just £1.2 million, 1.35% of that. So you can only tackle poverty if you put the resources in.
So my point of order, he has spent at least 5 minutes now talking about schools. This isn't an issue of schools. This is about uplifting working class, effectively, people from poverty. Nothing to do with his brief, but we've spent a spiel about schools.
Education is the way out of poverty. I'm afraid the route out of poverty isn't dishing out free money to people. We saw that with Communities First. It didn't work. You might want some glorious socialist state where you can dish out free money to everyone, where you can disincentivise work, where you can encourage people to stay at home. I'm afraid the only route out of poverty is to create those opportunities, to ensure that young people leave education with the skills they need to be able to go on to get a rewarding career. That's how you get people out of poverty. That's how you break that cycle. So I'm afraid there is a real issue.
1 minute.
Okay, there is a real issue about how much money we're able to invest in the education system. So I'm afraid I'm really worried about the Labour Party's approach to tackling poverty, which is just dishing out free money. The Institute for Public Policy Research concluded that in Scotland it'll cost £20 billion, and far from reducing child poverty, it'll make child poverty worse. We already live in a country where there's non-means testing, where billionaires like Lord Sugar can get free winter fuel payments. I'm afraid by dishing out free money to everyone, including those who don't need it, including those who are capable of working, you're not helping people out of poverty, you're creating a dependency culture. Instead, we need to create the opportunities for young people, for people of all ages, to climb out of poverty, and opportunities which will help everyone in Monmouthshire contribute to a more prosperous society.
Yeah. Councillor Taylor, and I really would prefer we don't have 10 minutes from every speaker this afternoon. There's a cup of tea and a piece of cake is calling.
However, Chair, it is each member's right to have the 10 minutes if they do want it. I'm not. Yeah, absolutely. But it is in the Constitution, Chair, that we have 10 minutes to speak if we do wish to take it.
I wasn't denying you 10 minutes, Francis. I wasn't denying it. I was just pointing out we have a special day. We have a very large audience at the back, and they all want a cup of tea and a piece of cake as well.
I'm sure, Chair, they'd love a cup of tea and a piece of cake. But to be fair, Councillor Petruni has put forward a motion, and in his motion, he is asking this council to write to Welsh Government. Let's just remember that. That's what he's asking. He's asking us to write to Welsh Government and say that if they were considering a basic universal income, that they should consider Monmouthshire Council area as a pilot. Now, actually, I think that that's probably reasonably easy to support, because it's asking for us to give consent to write to Welsh Government. It's not actually determining that a universal basic income will be spent in Monmouthshire. You know, so let's be clear about what it's about. But I just wanted to say a couple of things, really, and actually the issue of universal basic income is an interesting one, and some there's conflicting research, but actually it would be good to see a real analysis of it, frankly, and rather than sort of a bit of a diatribe. And I think if Councillor Petruni's motion of writing to Welsh Government helps stimulate some debate and discussion there, then that's not a bad thing. Because let's remember that our traditional approaches to poverty don't work. So poverty is increasing. Wales is the poorest of the UK nations, and eradicating poverty basically is a question of political will and nothing else. The reason that we have poverty is because of our structures, and that includes the education system. And if we had the will to change that, we would indeed be able to eradicate poverty. It's a man-made construct. So although I would take issue, I think, with some of the things that Councillor John said around Communities First, the reason Communities First did not work is because it did not tackle the structural barriers that create poverty. And all it did do was provide reasons for Welsh Government not to tackle some of the levers within which they have in their control. But we must remember that many of the levers that determine poverty are in the control of the UK Government. But Welsh Government has a significant part to play as well. And I think actually if we were going to write to them and ask about universal basic income, we should also write to them and ask them what they propose in place of Communities First, because the resilient communities piece doesn't seem to be transpiring very well. So I think we should perhaps debate the issue of poverty and social exclusion and social mobility in our communities, but we should do so on a footing which provides all members with the correct information about what poverty is, what it is caused by, and what are some of the options for reducing it. And recognising that as a local authority, we have a couple of levers to alleviate people's poverty, but we cannot eradicate it as a local authority. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Councillor Grocott.
Thank you, Chair. Since I joined this authority a year or so ago, I've heard people from the Chief Executive and the leader of this council down talking about how Monmouthshire often thinks outside the box, how Monmouthshire is innovative and comes up with new ideas. I'm disappointed this afternoon that the only representative of the Cabinet that spoke and gave a diatribe about education when this motion is actually not about education. This motion is simply saying that if the Welsh Government decide to look at a way of helping to alleviate poverty that thinks outside the box, we as a council should put our hands up and say, yes, let us be the council that you look to. And why would we be the best place to do that? Because in those housing figures that were published recently, the average price of a house is $312,000. The average price of a new build house is $388,000. And recent poverty figures show that 40% of the children in my ward live in poverty. I think that if we're looking at ways of addressing the balance of society and trying to create a world that is fairer, and let's remember the first of our well-being priorities that we've adopted as an authority, and that is that every child gets the best start in life. Here we have an opportunity to say, here is a radical way of thinking about poverty. Let's volunteer Monmouthshire if there is a pilot. What have the people over there got to be scared of? Let's think outside the box. Let's volunteer. And that's all that Councillor Batruni's motion is asking. I would beg this House to support it.
Thank you, Councillor Pratt. Councillor Pratt, please.
Thank you very much, Chair. And as the granddaughter of a coal miner from the Rhondda Valley, I totally agree with my colleague, Councillor John, that education is the way out of poverty. I won't go over the ground that's already been covered, but I do welcome this debate. And I did hear a very interesting programme on Jeremy Vine this week on this very subject. What concerns me about this idea is it may actually deprive the poor of much needed targeted support. It may also provide a disincentive to work. It could weaken the economy. And I think, quite frankly, it's been rejected in countries like Finland, which is a very high taxation country, because it was unaffordable. If you take the money currently targeted at the worst off and pay everyone universal payments, you are redistributing income upwards. And that was research by the Organisation for Economic Cooperation and Development. I think that it's not just about giving people money. Many people lack more than cash. For example, universal basic income will not cure addiction. It will not help those people with poor health. It will not help those who haven't got the skills to do a job, and other factors that contribute to poverty. I understand the Labour colleagues' frustration with the policies that have come out of Cardiff Bay for the last 20 years, because certainly those policies have not addressed these issues. And I'd like to finish by reading from the article which Councillor Petruni was mentioned in on the weekend's Western Mail. And it's a quote from Professor Ian Goldin of Oxford University. And he says that its introduction would lead to ballooning deficits, that by scrapping targeted benefits and giving it to everyone, the most deserving would get less, and that by incentivising people not to work, social cohesion would get worse. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Easton.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Chair. I support the initiative that we look at the Welsh Government to get some support and look at this. But if you look at the economy of the lower paid in Monmouthshire, they are living on an economy based on sand. And since 2010, when the Westminster Government, the Conservative Westminster Government, started the austerity programme, this level of sand has got thinner and thinner, and they are falling into a crevice. Since 2010, healthcare has been cut, social care, we're losing transport, rail is being cut back. The support to the Welsh Government, as everybody seems to criticise, is also being cut back. So this is just a way of trying to alleviate the problems that many people in my ward are suffering by. As Councillor Harris says, he's got deprivation in his ward, I got deprivation in my ward, and so has Councillor Evans got deprivation in his ward. Yet on the other side of Caldecott, there doesn't seem to be deprivation, it's in pockets. So we've got to try and address those problems, we've got to try and help them. Without being cynical, I know you're talking about a cup of tea and a cake afterwards. I think Councillor John takes a biscuit for his comments, quite frankly. So I just leave it like that. I do believe that it's a positive issue, a positive way forward, and it should be supported. It's a trial, it's not a permanent thing, and if we can't find ways of helping our deprived residents, I don't know what else we can do. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Watts.
Even in economy and development, I think Paula stand this up as well. We've talked about the future-proofing Monmouthshire, future-proofing local government in Wales, and the impact that robotic automation will have on businesses, on local authorities and national government. So I think it's something that we should explore, because I know in the States, looking at some of the figures, they reckon that could impact on 40% of the workforce. Now, if it's going to happen there, it's going to happen here. And then we've got to think about how we deal with those people who won't be able to find enough work or will be workless, an increasing amount. They can't all live on the gig economy. It's just impossible. And when we talk about that it's been unsuccessful, say, for example, in Finland, ironically, in Donald Trump's America, they trialled it in Chicago. So if they can trial it in Donald Trump's America in Chicago, why can't you trial this in Wales? Which, the consensus is that Wales is trying to be a progressive place, a modern place, and yet all we get from the likes of Richard John there is class warfare. Class, historic, boring, tedious, old thinking about keeping working class people down, and the fear of poverty is the way to kind of make sure that the rest of us get on with our lives. It's just not good enough. It's not progressive. It's not even human. And I tell you what, it's people like Mr. John there that make me, sometimes I get a bit fed up with being a member of the Labour Party. Sometimes I look at it and think, oh my God, why? I'm going to be honest with you, but it's times like this that reinforces my commitment to the Labour Party. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Pavia.
Thank you, Chair. And it's certainly interesting that the leader of the opposition group has brought this forward. He may well, as Councillor Watts alluded to, he may well be a visionary with the expansion of AI. This may be the future. At the minute, though, I'm not sure in terms of competence where the letter would sit with Welsh Government. That is an issue. I mean, the council will be well aware in terms of Scotland, there's already a bill, social security bill that's passing through the Scottish Parliament as we speak, and they're well on their way to developing, their own social security system. And I think that should be something there where we should be looking to develop a social security system for Wales, and I certainly would be welcoming to have further discussions on that. I do have concerns about this, and I was reading the Joseph Rowntree Foundation report on this, and they concluded that they didn't think UBI was a runner in their view, and they said the citizens' income would require two big principles to be accepted and supported by the public, naming that everyone should get a baseline level of state finance supported, even if they chose not to do anything to try and earn money for themselves, and that the basic margin rate should be much higher than it is now. Otherwise, almost everyone's net income from the state would rise, and there is no obvious way to finance this. The third objection that the Joseph Rowntree Foundation had was around housing costs. Now, for UBI to achieve its goal of removing complexity and distinctiveness, as Councillor Petruni said, which is obviously all underpinned by means testing, it would need to replace housing support costs. But with largely market-based rents, it would not be easy to include a simple rent element to the UBI payment without creating shortfalls for some or larger surpluses for another. And the same applies to means-tested childcare support as well. So I think this counter-argument is quite strong. And I think the central problem that the Joseph Rowntree Foundation put forward was that for those who are advocating UBI, either consciously or willfully, the thing they fail to acknowledge is that the current system is designed to provide specific payments for people in specific circumstances, which I think Councillor Pratt alluded to. Those caring, those with a disability, those with high housing costs, high childcare costs. So if you sweep all of that away, you either have to level up or give a massive boost to people without those specific needs, which is a huge cost, as Councillor Petruni has already mentioned, or you create a fall in income for those without them. And I really don't think either of those are remotely acceptable at the moment in the real world. Now, as I said, I can't support this motion. I understand and I welcome the debate. I would be interested in further debate on how we create a narrative for the Welsh Government to push back at the UK government and say, should we have further devolution of the social care system, social security system? I would be interested in certainly shaping that, but I can't support this motion as it is.
Thank you. Councillor Maureen Powell.
Thank you, Chairman. First, I must apologise for that. That wasn't a phone call. It was just the alarm to tell me to take my tablets. It overrides the phone. Sorry. That's the apology for that. I do get fed up of the Labour Party accusing us of being well off and the others being poor. Many times in my life I've had to struggle. My father said that whatever I got out of life I would have to work for. I wasn't going to say this today because I was talked about it in group, but in the 1970s I was living below the breadline. I got 2 children at home, the eldest was working. I went to the social services to try and get some help. I couldn't get any because I couldn't sign on unemployed because the flat I was living in was what I had in return for work. I had the flat, the electric and the coal, but I didn't get paid. And I had that in return for working at a garage. And I had to manage on a very little bit of maintenance that I had for my 2 children. So I know what it's like to be poor. And I couldn't get any help, so I just had to work. And I used to go at weekends and work picking stone and potatoes. So I know all about poverty. And I just get so cross the way you behave as though we don't. What I suggest is that Councillor Petruni goes to see his Labour Party in Assembly. If I've got a problem, I go and see one of our party in the Assembly and ask them to carry it on and do it. So why doesn't he go there and speak to his leader in the Assembly and ask him for his help? Not to ask us. We haven't got money in the council because we're the lowest paid. So why don't you go there to your own party and ask them to help you?
Thank you, Maureen. Councillor Tudor Thomas, before it's wound up. Thank you. Yeah, you're going to.
I won't go into a huge sob story now. I'm sure all of us have various stories to tell. But I came from a background, not an affluent one, but at a time when there were educational grants available, and being one of four, we all went on into higher education and into fairly successful careers. I fully support what Councillor Petroni has put forward today. We need to look at this. We do live in an affluent county, or some of us do, but for many people across the authority, in North Abergavenny, in the towns, but also in the country as well. I well remember teaching a child who lived, yes, in a marvellous village, but as he said to me, look, Mr. Thomas, I can't eat the view. We haven't got much money, and therefore I can't go to university. And in the end, we've had quite a bit of jockeying for position politically today, but in the end, I think that we need to put that aside. We can't continue wringing our hands saying, well, yes, some people in Monmouth are highly affluent, they work elsewhere, as I did. I worked in Cardiff and lived in Monmouth in a fairly well-paid job. But for lots of people, they don't have that advantage. And certainly teaching in King Henry VIII many years ago, there was that huge dichotomy between people who came from very affluent backgrounds. And I remember one whose father had the local garage, she had a brand new car. Another boy in the same class was looking down the back of the settee for 2 bob. And then where's the equality in that? They didn't have equality of opportunity. And so in reality, what we need to do is to actually begin to address the issue. And I see a perfectly good rationale for at least writing to Welsh Government just to test this out. I know it might well be kicked down, but we really need to do something about it. We can't carry on as we are.
Thank you, Councillor Greenland.
Thank you, Chair. An interesting debate, undoubtedly, and I think that I would go for every member in this council. If we thought we had an answer to poverty for those who have the lowest incomes, especially for those with children who need a good start in life, I think we would all jump at any solution that came forward. Councillor Petroni has spoken very eloquently that this is an idea which should be taken forward. We've also heard mention that this council is an innovative council. Yes, it is. And when we take forward innovative ideas, we test them thoroughly. And we do take risks, but they are calculated risks, which have been taken after a lot of consideration. This particular idea is, has been said, is not a new one. It's been around for years, for centuries, in fact. And that puts a question mark in my mind. If it was such a good idea and has been around so long, why haven't we all adopted it after a couple of centuries? And we now know that there are countries that are looking at it and have looked at it. Canada and Finland. But after 2 years, Finland has withdrawn. And Finland is one of the highest taxation countries in the world. If it can't afford to run this scheme, can we, or can the Welsh Government, is what we're asking here. We've also heard that it's been tried, or it's on trial in Scotland. And as has been said, Scotland is going to take its own social services over. So they have the ability, or they will have the ability, if this trial comes out, to be able to incorporate that in Scotland, because they will have complete control over their social benefits system. But of course, that's not the position in Wales. The position in Wales is that the benefit system is administered from Westminster. So how could this possibly work in Wales? How could it be that, and of course we've heard Councillor Petroni has said, this is going to be a costly programme. So where is the money coming from? Is the Welsh Government prepared to put in the money to fund a programme like this? And the first question I would want to ask the Welsh Government is, are you prepared to put the money in? Are you prepared to use the powers that you've got in taxation to put up taxation in Wales in order to be able to fund something like this? That's the first question we should be asking the Welsh Government. But in the meantime, we already know that there is a trial going forward in Scotland. Surely the sensible thing is to see how that trial comes out. And it comes out, I think the trial goes until 2019. I dare say the results won't be until 2020. Therefore, it seems to me that the sensible thing to do is to look what happens in Scotland and see whether or not Scotland can make it work. Because if they can't make it work, I've no doubt that Wales can't make it work either. So I'm afraid that much as I would love to be able to say, that this is something which I could support because I believe it has legs. I believe that, frankly, I can't support it, though I would like to be asking the Welsh Government if they would like to take it forward. And then, if Scotland found that it had been a successful pilot project, then I'd be prepared to look again and say, shall we do it in Monmouthshire? Because poverty is something we haven't cracked, and it's something that we certainly need to. But this is too early to be able to say that Monmouthshire will take this on board.
Chair, there's a point of clarification, please, before Councillor Green sits down. Was that an amendment?
No. No. You can't.
Well, I thought you were amending the question.
No, Kevin. Councillor Pratt, can you switch your microphone off? I've been trying to signal you for about 20 minutes and I haven't managed it. Right, we've got one last contribution from Councillor Breakborough, who's passed a message to me that it'll be a short contribution.
Please, no amendments. I guess I just want to sort of bring it back and summarise it, because if you look at the motion, it's that this council will write to the Welsh Government, and if they are considering a pilot study, could we be part of it? It's not saying do we agree with the idea, it's not saying that we will support the idea, all it is saying, do we want to have some control over where this goes? Because if it's not us, it'll be another authority. That's all this is asking for.
To know the money's there to do it.
Okay, shh. We've got all these people looking at us at the back of the room, wondering what the dickens they've come in the room for. Right, we've had a... Yeah, it's up to you. You can now sum up, Councillor Petroni.
Thank you. I'll be really quick. I want to answer some of the questions. There was much talk about Finland. Finland didn't do the universal basic income. It only targeted unemployed people, and the centre-right government gave it up after 2 years because it was a political move. Do the research. So, the best contribution was from Councillor Pavia, who raised very good points. I think you talked about why local government. Local government, because we know the local area better than anyone else. So as Debbie Blakeborough said, why not Monmouthshire? Why does it go to Blaenau? Why does it go, come here, we have a hidden problem, let's try and deal with it. Councillor Richard John, you're a passionate Conservative, right? I actually respect that, I really do. And I know many of you ideologically will feel really, really opposed to free money, but if you actually follow the evidence, it's worth a trial. I mean, it really is. And I saw a laugh there. The only universal thing, not from Councillor John, I must admit, the only universal thing in this country, which is really, really popular, where there's no means testing whatsoever, is the NHS. And no one quibbles over that now. And it was it was ridiculed by the Conservatives then as a radical idea. That it was unworkable. There'll be all sorts of chaos. And I'll put this to Richard John. Work is changing. Maybe in the past, work was the way out of it, but we know living costs are rising beyond inflation, or at least as a trajectory, as a long-term trend. We know automation's happening. We know we're moving to a gig economy where work is more insecure. We know there are more self-employed people, which is a good thing, more than ever before, but when self-employment, work and money is insecure, we are moving to that society where work might not pay anymore to keep people's basic needs. We know from the data that nearly 40% of working people now are struggling to make ends meet. This is an idea. I'm asking, if you read the article, it's a trial. It's to make sure Monmouthshire could be at the front of the line. That's not saying this is the answer to poverty. It might not be. It might be an absolute disaster. But why not be at the front of, let's testing new stuff out? Instead of the old ideas and the old dogma, same for the Labour Party and same for the Conservative Party. It's boring. It's boring. Our politics is boring. It's nostalgia politics and it's out of tune. And let's get up to speed.
Right, we've come to that time of the afternoon. We're going to take a vote. No, it's tea I'm going for, don't worry. Right, we have a motion from Councillor Petroni. Will all those who support him please show their hands? Debbie, you only get one hand. 1, 2. And you, Francis? 15, okay. And those against the motion, please show. The motion is lost. Right, all sit still because it's a very important afternoon. Do you want to go first, Paul? Okay, or do you want Pete to go first? Councillor Fox.
Thank you, Chairman. I sat quiet for that last debate. It was great to listen to it. But now on to something equally as important for this authority. Kelly, it's your last day. Well, last day tomorrow probably, is it? Or certainly the last full council. And it doesn't seem like long ago when we were interviewing you in the old county hall. If you remember, it was in the chairman's suite. And I remember you coming in and, you blew us away at that point because you were just so different, so unconventional from some of our experiences of interviewing officers. And we wondered what we were getting. You were like a whirlwind. You had a dynamism which was so energizing and exciting. And I think what you've contributed to this authority over the, I don't know how many years it is now, must be 7, is it? 7 years? It has been amazing, and it's probably difficult. We can't just think of all of the things, but you and other parts of the senior leadership team have influenced so much of the way this council has evolved, how we as councillors have seen things and addressed things. Together, we collectively have changed the face of this council and taken it forward, and you've been a really big part of that. So I just want to really say thank you. Thank you for all you've done. You just the people at the back is testament, I think, to the possibly testament to the respect that you've commanded in your approach, how you've released people to think in a different way and allowed people, along with Paul, to think just to think of things outside of the box, just to challenge those old conventions and then give us the opportunity of doing things a little differently. So I do thank you for that. As I've shared in an email to you, I'm sad to see you go, obviously, but I'm pleased you're going because Wales and the region need you, and they need you, and that's why it's so right that you're going to take that role of leading the city region city deal, and you've got so much to offer the region and Wales. We've benefited from you, and the rest of the region will benefit from you now, and I have the pleasure of continuing to work with you. So it's not goodbye from me, but just on behalf of the whole council, not just a political group. I just want to say thank you for all you've done and wish you well.
Councillor Petroni.
Building on what the leaders just said, I was thinking about this, and I would phrase you and Paul as the heartbeat of Monmouthshire County Council. Set the tone, set the pace. I sound like Paul then, Jesus, I need to leave. The striking thing about you, as the leader talked about, is I would, if you were in the private sector, I would say a go-getter. Would that be fair? That doesn't offend you, does it? A go-getter. And what I love about you, and when I've had my weird ideas, is why not? And that's a key of thinking. And part of that previous debate is that I think that's where I sit. And seeing officers which have this reputation of, well, we can't, and this is the issue, and this is the problem, and it's practically difficult. You've overcome that, and you think differently, or at least willing to try to think differently. And that can't be underestimated. And it takes a huge amount of self-awareness. And as we know, and as a politician, it's a skill and ability that not many people have, self-awareness. But being able to say, actually, is that my prejudice kicking in? Is that my baggage big? Why wouldn't this work? And maybe the evidence says it doesn't. But why not, is the first premise. And I think this council is going to lose a hell of a force. And maybe the region benefits, but we won't. And I'm selfish about Monmouthshire, to be honest. You've got a hell of a job. I think there's probably you and a few other people that could only do it. It's a big agenda. It's a life-changing agenda for you and for many people that you could possibly affect. I wish you all the best. I know the Labour group does. We'll miss you, and I hope we'll keep the mindset of why not.
Thank you. Thank you, Dimitri. Councillor Blakeborough.
Thanks. All right. Just give myself some room here. So in 2012, when I was first elected, wondering what the hell I'd let myself in for, I do remember within my first 2 months going out on my patch with this quite amazing woman, really. I was thinking she's intelligent, she's funny, she's wise, and she's got some fabulous shoes. And I was dazzled. And Kelly, I continue to be dazzled, impressed, and inspired by you. And I do genuinely feel privileged to know you. If you want to inspire your girls and your daughters and your sons, for that matter, I would point towards Kelly because she steps up to the plate and she leans in. And Kelly, if you remember the many conversations we have with Sheryl Sandberg's Lean In philosophy, looking at what would you do if you weren't afraid, and inspiring people to fulfill their ambitions. And you have done that professionally, but also privately. And as a mother, you have 2 girls, and my word, have they got something to look up to there. But one in particular, I think you've already inspired your younger daughter, Harry. Is she 4 or 5 now? And you've inspired her to want to achieve her long ambition. And her dream, ladies and gentlemen, is to be a waitress. Fabulous. So it's not the director of an organisation or a doctor or the Prime Minister, but you've empowered her to inspire to be what she wants to be. And actually, wanting to be a waitress is a bit of a chip off the old block, because both of you are committed to serve others. And definitely in your time with us here in Monmouthshire, it's already been said, you've served the residents of Monmouthshire superbly. You've been, and I would describe you as the salt of the organisation, because you're the essential ingredient in creating a forward-thinking, outward-looking, creative council. And absolutely right, it'll be tasteless. The food will not taste good without you being here. During our International Women's Day, if you remember, we stood up there and said our bit, and you argued for an alternative to Sheryl's lean-in philosophy. If you remember, you suggested a lean-out, a permission to stand back from the challenge. Kelly, come on, that is not in your nature. You are an absolute lean-in. And I was looking at phrases and quotes, and I've seen this quite a lot actually recently, and I, again, think of you. You are the kind of woman that when your feet hit the floor each morning, the devil, or in this case us members, say, oh crap, she's up. And that's who you are. Because I think you get up every day and you say to yourself, what can I do to make a difference today? And that's where you're at. So with me, you have the energy, you have great courage. The word passion it doesn't say enough, and so I want to use the words feisty and gritty, and I think maybe that sort of harks back to your Newport days, and I think you've regularly said you can take, the girl out of the port, but you can't take the port out of the girl, and that is with you there, with community spirit, and you really enjoy people as well. You're also very kind, very compassionate, so when you're walking through the council and Kelly says, how are you? She's not being polite, she really wants to know, how are you? And she can read people's faces and she'll keep asking you the question until you break down and say, well, actually, Kelly. And she will listen. So, with that, as I say, you are a mover and shaker, but you're also a good support and a friend to many. And you're not afraid to show your human side because, everybody has vulnerabilities. You're not superwoman. You don't say you're superwoman. Actually, I think you are superwoman because you're prepared to show your vulnerable side. So I now want to wrap up with a limerick I made up. I ain't giving up my daytime job once you've heard this. And here it is. There was a gritty woman named Kelly who seized the day and give it some welly. Wearing shoes with a heel, she secured the city deal. We're proud of our Wonder Woman named Kelly. So, so from the Independents, have a great adventure, and I know you're not going to forget us. Thanks.
Thank you, Deborah. Do you want to have a last contribution from the back? Yep, Joe?
Thank you. Very briefly, because I'm sure everybody's extremely keen to get to some cake. Kelly, thank you. Thank you very much. You've always been a very supportive officer. You've worked with people on an individual basis, and that has really been appreciated. You always put full effort into everything that you've done, and we've really, really seen the effects of that. You're clear. You give really great descriptive ways of talking about the information that we need, and we really do wish you well, and we hope that we will continue to see you. But good luck.
Thank you, Joe. Councillor Greenland.
It's not usual for deputy leaders to speak as well as the leader, but this is a special occasion. I've had the privilege of working with Kelly since, for 7 or 8 years, the whole time she has been here. And I remember one of the first things she told me was that she wanted to make this place better for her girls. Not just for her girls, but for all the young people, not just in Monmouthshire, but the whole of South East Wales. And when she came, innovation was a dirty word. And she championed innovation, and she took it forward. And I remember one of the first events we did was a conference in Chepstow Racecourse. And this wasn't just a little conference. I thought, well, we'll have a few people there as a business breakfast or something. Oh, no, this wasn't. This was a 2-day event, which really showed the business world that Monmouthshire was open and that we wanted them to come and see what we had to offer. And then, of course, we had the association with Nesta. That, again, took us forward in terms of innovation. And it showed us that, or it showed others, that Monmouthshire was actually amongst the leading authorities in the whole of the UK. Kelly Byrne has been a leader that we've seen grown. And it's not because she was in Monmouthshire that she's grown in stature. It is because of who she is. And when you look at some leaders in, well, let's say the world even, look at that conference that we saw between the two world leaders of nuclear powers. And when I was watching that, I thought, goodness me, there's just too much testosterone around here. What we need is a little bit more estrogen. And that's what she's got. There are not many... there are not many leaders who have that combination and can take it forward. And she's got a lot of that. I remember one occasion when she was actually in an important meeting and she had a message that one of her staff, and how many staff do you control? I don't know how many, but one of your staff had been taken ill. What does she do? Immediately she leaves and it goes to somewhere else in the county where this person was working, and she was with her, taking care of her for hours and hours. That's true leadership, where she cares for the people who work for her. And then I remember being present at the regional cabinet meeting where the issue of the new program director was brought up. And as we discussed this job description, I thought this job has got Kellyburn written all over it. And of course, that's what it is. That's where you're going. And I don't like to think of you leaving us. I'd rather think that we're going to share you with 9 other authorities, because you are now going to be doing really what your girls would want you to do, make a difference to the whole of South East Wales. So the one thing I can say is that you should find it easier. Instead of dealing with this rowdy bunch, you'll only have 10 of them to deal with in future, but you go with our best wishes. Thank you.
Chief Executive.
You've only had to put up with her for 7 years. I think I've had her for 14. And it's absolutely wonderful to sit here with nothing else to say. To hear what's come from the chamber. She'll tell you in her own words in a few moments, but that's what she's about. If you reflect on, it's not what they said, it's not what they did, it's how they made you feel. It's the feeling, I think, that will change. Not for the better, but we'll have to find another way forward, as will Kelly. When we interviewed her, those of us that are still here, I can't exactly remember the question, but the answer came out, well, if I was an ice cream, I wouldn't be vanilla. I'd be tutti frutti, a bit of chocolate, strawberry sauce, and some raspberry ripple all on the top.
And a flake.
And a flake. And I looked at the members on the panel at that point in time, and I thought, oh, bugger. Is this going to work? But yeah, it did work. And I think when you interview for a position, you have to interview authentically. You have to put it out there, you know, who I am, the way I'm going to be. And of all the people that I've worked with in my career, this lady brings an authenticity. When you need a shield, she carries your shield. When you need a sword, by God, can she wave a sword. But it's that balance, and it's that desire to keep moving forward. And in our world, in your world, that's tough. We're in a range of conversations at the moment whereby we're reflecting on to be successful as a leader, but particularly to be successful as a public service leader. Your EQ, your emotional quotient, your resilience is a damn sight more important than your IQ. The ability to see things through, to keep moving forward. And if members you choose to turn and just look at the people sat behind you for once, what you will see planners, you will see technicians, you will see digital people, you will see customer service people, You will see policy people, people that work in volunteering, people that work in comms, people that work in planning, people that work in highways, people that work in leisure, people that work in youth. Do you get my message? I think you're seeing an audience that have felt a special presence. You're seeing an audience that have felt, I think, the emergence here of a real Deputy Chief Executive, but more than that, a real leader. I think will be a platform for Kelly's future. I think it's absolutely wonderful that she's moved her family here. I think that's the biggest testament, I guess, that she's really bought into what we're about. But for all these nice words, she arrived as a rough diamond and she leaves probably as a rougher diamond. We felt the pain, we felt the glory. There have been many more good things than there have been bad. But for some of you, if you just sit back for a moment and just reflect on the tough times, because not everything is easy in public service. Not everything is easy over a time span of 7 to 8 years. There have been times when you've been angry. There have been times when you've been annoyed. Think about who's fronted up at those moments. Think about the bad times. Think about who's been there. Think about who's galvanised the next step. Think about who's actually been working behind the scenes with those people looking at your backs now to say, don't worry, there's a way forward. We'll find it. And as Councillor Petruni said, it's always why, but why with the right orientation. We will find a way through. So yeah, this is a big moment for us. There is no way of celebrating the dilution of this talent, but Wales needs talent like this. And I think we should look back and just rejoice in the fact that we've made a small contribution. We've been able to contribute. And now we get the chance to really watch it flower, as I'm sure it will. So we will all miss you a bit. I've got a feeling you won't be going too far. I've got a feeling that au revoir is probably the right descriptor for today. But what a talent. What an impressive person. When you look back at an interview process and you remember what somebody said they were going to do, she's done it. Time and time again. Well done.
Well done, Bob.
Right, enough now, sit down. I did just want to say a few words. I had no idea that this was going to happen this afternoon. Now I realise I was set up from about 11 o'clock this morning. But as I said in my email earlier, I do feel really honoured. I know that's a word we use and see and hear so much. But I do feel really honoured to have worked with such a talented, impressive, exceptional bunch of officers, of politicians who have supported me every single step of the way. And I think what Monmouthshire has that makes it stand out is that searing sense of purpose. People know they're fit, they know their contribution, and I think that's what makes us able to scale success and to repeat it time and time again. So I wanted to thank you very briefly for everything you've all done for me, all those individual conversations, the support, the pats on the back, the times when I failed and you told me it would get better, and it did, because I learned that every single success was always a failure in the middle. So thank you for all of the investment that you've made in me over the years. And I think what that's done for me is really helped me, it's improved me. I'm still rough, but I don't mind that because I can keep it real. I think that gives you a different connection. So I don't mind that. But hopefully I'm a bit more self-aware. Hopefully some of those rough edges have been rubbed off. Hopefully I'm a bit more mellow, a bit more considered, and a bit more thoughtful. Important qualities that I will definitely be taking into my new role. But I tell you what, come 9 o'clock on Monday morning, I'm going to hit that city deal like a rocket. And the reason I'm going to hit it like a rocket is because the clock is ticking, and I think it needs dynamism, it needs pace, it needs a different perspective, it needs different thought processes. And that is because that clock is fast ticking. It's not ticking fast on the government review or the gateway review for them to come in and see what we've done and what kind of outcomes have we created. It's ticking on people's lives. Because I am from this region, I am from Newport, I live in Monmouthshire, and when I look around and I see family, friends, colleagues, acquaintances, I know a lot of people who are far from reaching their potential. I know a lot of people who don't feel valued or part of it or enabled or engaged. And I think if this city deal is just about GVA and jobs and growth, which are needed, but if this city deal doesn't impact those people that need it the most, if this city deal doesn't create a better reality for future generations, then we and I would have got it badly wrong. So hopefully that will be the hallmark of my tenure with the city deal. So thank you, Monmouthshire, one and all. As I say, I'm honoured and humbled, and you've never, ever let me down, and I'll try my best not to let you down. Thank you.
It only leaves me to invite you all onto the balcony for tea and cake at 20 to 6. There we go.